Chapter 1040, The Bright Moon Divine Hall. As the water quickly rose, the deck below Jianchen no longer remained stable. It began to violently rock. This sudden occurrence sort of surprised Jianchen and the others. They immediately stopped drinking. Quan Yotsai's face twitched, and he instantly sobered up. The ferry started to rock more and more violently, which made it harder and harder to keep upright. The drinking table on the deck also began to violently tremble, as various dishes crashed onto the deck. What's happening? Why is the ferry suddenly rocking so violently? Are we capsizing? Quan Yukai called out. He looked around with interest. The current situation confused him. Yang Ling immediately became alert, and his drunkenness vanished as well. His eyes shone as he glared around, prepared for battle at any moment. Yu Yu hugged Jianchen's arm, but she seemed calm. It was like she would be safe even if the sky collapsed as long as she was by Jianchen's side. Jianchen slowly put down his wine cup as he nonchalantly stood on the deck. He expanded his presence, which quickly reached into the water. However, Jianchen became surprised very quickly. Disbelief flooded his face, as he said to Quan Yukai and Yang Ling, "Leave the ferry and contact the sailors of the ship. Tell them to dock to the side immediately." With that, Jianchen took to the sky with Yu Yu and flew 100 meters into the air. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling were completely clueless about the current situation, they needed to follow Jianchen's instructions. The two of them immediately ran below deck to contact the sailors. Then, they took to the sky as well and left the ferry. He Yu and Hong Lian also took to the air and reached an altitude of 100 meters from the rear of the ship. They gathered with Jianchen, and looked down at the surface of the river. The water of Fragrance River climbed higher and higher. It had already flowed over the banks and flooded into the distance. At this moment, the water levels alarmed all the people on the two sides. Some stronger people began to use their various abilities and climbed the trees around them. The ferries in the center of the river also began to slowly tip and sank one by one. The sailors on the boats had all leaped off. They were currently swimming toward the banks in confusion and alarm. Splash! Suddenly, a huge splash exploded, which created a huge ripple that was over 1,000 meters wide. In that instant, a silvery white divine hall slowly broke through the water. As it flickered with light, it surged into the sky as water surged off of it. Everything unfolded on a grand scale. What is this thing? Quan Yukai was struck dumb. He stared at the silvery white divine hall as it rose into the air. Shock filled his face. Yang Ling, who hovered beside him, also became wide-eyed. They could not recognize the divine hall with their current level of knowledge. The divine hall shot into the air while emitting a hazy, silver light. A sacredness permeated the hall, as it lit up the dark night sky to the point where it seemed like daytime. The noisy banks became quiet in that instant. Everyone stared blankly at the divine hall that was growing, as it rose into the sky. No one paid any more attention to the water that had suddenly risen. The divine hall was 1,000 meters long and several hundred meters tall. The craftsmanship was exquisite and perfect. It seemed like a flawless piece of art. The divine hall rose to an altitude of 10 kilometers before it stopped. It radiated with a pressure that spread out in all directions in a blanketing manner. All the energy of the world became docile before it. This alerted all the ancestors of the 8 clans, the experts of the Tsar family, and the people of the Radiant Saint Master Union. When they raised their heads and saw the thumb-sized divine hall that hovered in the air, they immediately became interested. Without any hesitation, they all shot into the air as fast as they could and made way to the divine hall. At the same time, many experts in various places of the continent sensed the divine hall as well. They all came out of seclusion and traveled toward the city of God. I never thought that there would be divine hall hidden at the bottom of Fragrance River. This is unbelievable, Jian Chen murmured to himself as he stared at the divine hall in the air. Afterward, he charged toward it with Yu Yu in his arms while He Yu and Hong Lian followed close behind. Quan Yukai stared at the divine hall in interest, as he said with marvel, "Looks like it's really true that there can never be anything too strange. I never thought that a house could fly and even fly so high. This sure has broadened my horizons today. Yang Ling, let's go up there and have a look." Quan Yukai and Yang Ling did not fall behind either, and they tailed Jian Chen into the sky. There were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters on the banks of the river. As such, even more Heaven Saint Masters took to the air as soon as Quan Yukai and Yang Ling followed Jian Chen. They used the energy of the world to levitate and created colorful lights that flickered in the sky. The sight was enchanting. Jian Chen arrived at the same altitude as the divine hall with Yu Yu. The two of them stared fixedly at it. The four words, "Bright Moon Divine Hall," hung on a great big board above the main entrance. The appearance of the divine hall had raised quite a large commotion. Figures constantly flickered through the surroundings and saint rulers had already arrived at the main entrance. There were a few saint rulers from the Union and the Tsar family besides the ancestors of the 8 clans. The faces of all the saint rulers from the 8 clans were pale and haggard. Clearly, they still had not fully recovered from their self-mutilation earlier in the day. The Bright Moon Divine Hall. I never thought that it would actually be the Bright Moon Divine Hall, a cry rang out from nearby. An old man in simple robes stared at the bright divine hall as all the people from the Radiant Saint Master Union gathered behind him. To no surprise, the president and grand elder were present as well. When Jian Chen saw the old man, his eyes froze. He could not help but think back to the old man cleaning furniture. Jian Chen had initially met this man in the Radiant Saint Tower. At that time, the old man was still a mysterious expert that Jian Chen could not see through, but now, Jian Chen could clearly see the old man's strength. He was a 3rd heavenly layer Saint King that had just broken through. The president sighed deeply and said, "It's recorded that 50,000 years ago, Fairy Hao Yu was possibly the most beautiful person in the world. She also possessed unprecedented, exceptional talent. She used just 2,000 years to reach the peak of Saint Emperor and was only a paper-thin margin away from surpassing Saint Emperor, but it is a pity. She failed to overcome this margin and was stuck there for over 7,000 years. In the end, she still failed to escape the limits of life and passed away in meditation helplessly and regretfully. It's really just a female way to say the gender-neutral immortal, except Hao Yu here isn't really immortal because she passed away. This is why I stuck with fairy, albeit a translation I dislike. Also, Hao Yu means bright moon, so the divine hall actually has the same name as the person. I used an English translation for the divine hall since it's more like a title, while the Hao Yu in Fairy Hao Yu is likely to be her name. It said that the cultivation method Fairy Hao Yu used was extremely wondrous. It used the essence of moonlight. When cultivating at night, the whole process of absorption is clearly visible. It's a cultivation method that surpasses the saint tier, and anyone who uses it to cultivate will be able to improve at astonishing speeds, added the Grand Elder. It's indeed mentioned in the records like that, but it's a pity that only females can use the cultivation method, said the president. With that, Jian Chen's eyes immediately lit up. He seemed to beam slightly. At that moment, the surrounding space began to ripple violently. Space gates appeared one after another as Saint Kings stepped out with tremendous presences. They all stared at the divine hall, gasping uncontrollably. Jian Chen glances over all the Saint Kings, and he saw the people of the 10 protector clans. Included was an expert from the Pure Heart Pavilion and one from the Changyang clan. However, Jian Chen did not know the name of the Changyang clan expert even though he had seen him before. I never thought that it would be the Bright Moon Divine Hall of the famed Fairy Hao Yu from 50,000 years ago. It said that the Divine Hall was built from some wondrous crystals from the moon and that the fairy spent 1,000 years traversing to and fro collecting them. Not only is the divine hall extremely tough, it possesses moonlight force, said a knowledgeable expert from the 10 protector clans as they marveled in wonder. Chapter 1041, Saint King Killing Formation. 1. More and more people gathered around the bright moon divine hall. Not only did quite a few Saint Kings come, a lot of Saint Rulers arrived as well. There was also some Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, who stood on a milky white light. A capital city of the continent was a place where experts gathered. Fragrance River was just outside the City of God, which was why many experts were drawn over immediately when the divine hall broke its seal. A few people with certain backgrounds even used secret techniques to communicate with the experts of their family and their powerful friends, informing them of the current events here. So this object is called a divine hall, something a saint emperor crafted. No wonder it's so wondrous and can fly to such a high place. Quan Yu Kai and Yang Ling arrived behind Jian Chen, as they marveled at the divine hall that shone with hazy light. The material of this divine hall really is extremely special. It can actually absorb moonlight and transform it into its own power. He Yu stared at the divine hall in wonder. Jian Chen's eyes froze when he heard that, and only after a period of close observation did he notice that the divine hall had indeed absorbed a sliver of moonlight from the night sky. The moonlight was so faint. If he did not look closely, he would not be able to sense it at all. A sliver of reminiscence appeared in Hong Lian's eyes as inherited memories flashed through her head. They're right. This bright moon divine hall is indeed created from special materials from the moon. There are records regarding this material in my inherited memories. Hong Lian paused and raised her head up toward the moon in the sky. This is because in the ancient times, a saint emperor of my divine phoenix clan flew off to the moon. However, she took much more time than Fairy Haoyu, taking up 4,000 years for a round trip. Jian Chen immediately became astounded when he heard these words. He subconsciously looked toward the moon in the sky and sighed emotionally. I never thought that we would be so far away from the moon, that it would take 1,000, or even several thousand years for saint emperors to reach there. This is unbelievable. The moon is indeed a place that people rarely set foot upon. Even in the ancient times when there were the most saint emperors, very few people were willing to spend that much time to fly to the moon, because space gates cannot be created in outer space. The only way to the moon is by flying over slowly, said Hong Lian. The divine hall must possess the cultivation method of Fairy Haoyu. Although only females can use it, if you give it to those talented female clansmen once we take it back, their future accomplishments will be unlimited. The eyes of the experts from the protector clans and a few saint kings of other organizations shone, as they stared at the divine hall with obvious greed. Even if you ignored the value of the material used to build the divine hall, just the cultivation method was enough to cause the people from the protector clans to drool. This was a cultivation method that surpassed Saint Tier. Even the protector clans that had existed since the ancient times did not have such a great cultivation method. At this moment, the people of the protector clans began to move before everyone else. They either flew toward the divine hall themselves or with a few saint ruler juniors. Only the middle-aged man from the Pure Heart Pavilion remained still, as he was the only person who the divine hall did not tempt out of everyone present. The people of the protector clans were like flares. As soon as they began to move, the saint kings from ancient families or other large organizations began to move as well. They quickly approached the divine hall. The saint rulers in the surroundings all hesitated, as they levitated in the air. Before the saint kings, they had nothing to contend against them as mere saint rulers. Even if they came across treasures, they would not be able to beat the saint kings to take it for themselves. Instead, they might even face life-threatening danger. However, not all the saint rulers feared death. After a while of hesitation, someone finally gave in to their expanding desires, as he flew toward the divine hall even with the dangers ahead. However, his actions deeply influenced other people, which immediately led to more and more saint rulers flying toward the divine hall. Even a few Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters followed behind them all. Quan Yukai, Yang Ling, it'll be dangerous inside. You two should stay outside and not take part, Jian Chen said to the two of them, before flying toward the Divine Hall with Yu Yu in his arms. He Yu and Hong Lian followed closely behind him. Sigh, looks like a fierce struggle is bound to happen. However, the new master of the Divine Hall seems to have already been secretly determined, said the Saint King of the Pure Heart Pavilion. He glanced at the nearby Jian Chen. When he saw He Yu behind him, an obvious sliver of fear appeared in his eyes. Afterward, he ripped open a space gate and left. He had no plans in interfering with the matter of this Divine Hall. The ancestors of the 8 clans all hung in the air with their pale faces. They stared deeply at the people who flew toward the Divine Hall as regret filled their faces. We're already heavily injured. We don't have the ability to take part in the struggle for the Divine Hall at all, so let's return, said a saint ruler of the 8 clans, before leaving first with a face full of regret. The other saint rulers all sighed inside. Then, they left dejectedly as well. They all returned to the city of God. Jian Chen arrived at the main entrance of the Divine Hall with the crowd. Yu Yu was still in his arms. He hid within the mass of people. Bang! 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 A few muffled sounds rang out from ahead. The people from the Protector clans at the very front had already opened the closed door of the Divine Hall. The heavy, stone door slowly opened with a series of rumbles. Immediately, a cold stream of air surged wildly from within. It was almost bone-chilling and gave off a bleak feeling, which shocked everyone present. This is Moonlight Force, called out a Saint King from among the people of the Protector clans. Moonlight Force is not Saint Force, so it indeed possesses odd characteristics. No wonder Fairy Hao became the most powerful Saint Emperor back then. It probably has a close connection to this unique Moonlight Force other than her own strength, someone suggested. All the people stepped on the floor made from the crystals of the moon, as they slowly made their way inside. After they passed through the main entrance, an extremely vast space appeared before them. In the center of the space stood a 100-meter-tall stone tablet. There were words clearly carved into it. Saint Emperors and Saint Kings are forbidden from entering the Divine Hall, or you will be responsible for the consequences. All the Saint Kings revealed rather horrible expressions when they saw this simple message. Although the warning of the tablet seemed to be filled with confidence and arrogance, where it dared to even look down on Saint Emperor, none of the Saint King present dared to not keep the warning in mind. The owner of the Divine Hall was the Fairy Hao. She had reached the peak of Saint Emperor after all, someone who was only inches away from surpassing Saint Emperor. On the other hand, the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters all became excited. They were all ecstatic, as they internally praised the heavens for being fair. I never thought that the Divine Hall would only allow people below Saint King to enter, barring the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors. Fairy Hao must have set up a formation to deal with Saint Kings and Saint Emperors inside, a Saint King of an ancient clan said with an ugly expression. Humph, it has been several tens of thousand years since Fairy Hao's era. The formation must be far weaker than it was before. Do we really need to fear with so many people? Shouted a blue-robed old man loudly and courageously. Fairy Hao may be the strongest Saint Emperor back then and possess terrifying strength, but wouldn't it become a joke if we were scared off just by some words on a tablet? Another middle-aged man added. He showed no intentions of backing off. Chapter 1042, Saint King Killing Formation, 2, You're right. If so many people are frightened to the point where we would shy away just because of a tablet, would we still have any dignity to move around on the continent? I, Ji Yuanba, will be entering the Bright Moon Divine Hall no matter what today. I'd like to see the abilities of the former strongest Saint Emperor, Fairy Hao, and how great they are. Can she use a mere Divine Hall to kill a Saint King? Said a burly, scar-faced, middle-aged man. All the Saint Kings reacted to these words. The fear in their eyes disappeared, and they became determined. They were not mindless. Since they were able to become Saint Kings, life and death situations had tempered each and every one of them. They had stepped over countless corpses and climbed out from mountains of bodies. How would they fear death? Also, Saint Kings were people who stood on the very apex of the continent, so they naturally had their pride. How could they bear with the fact that just some words scared them away? Looks like it's going to be quite entertaining here. At this moment, clear laughter rang out from behind. Another striking Saint King had entered the divine hall. He looked roughly 30 years old, and was extremely handsome. He possessed a scholarly elegance, where all his movements carried great grace. Beside him was a white-dressed, devastating beauty. Kara Li Wei. Jian Chen became slightly stunned when he saw her. He had not thought that Kara Li Wei had actually returned and would come back to the divine hall. Afterward, Jian Chen glanced toward the middle-aged man who stood beside her. His gaze immediately froze. He recognized this man as well. It was the ancestor of the Kara clan that he had met in the imperial palace of the Qinhuang kingdom back then. Kara Lot, I thought you wouldn't come. I didn't think you'd actually bring the treasure of your clan as well, a heavy voice boomed from the crowd. An ordinary-looking, middle-aged man in tight robes spoke to the ancestor of the Kara clan. Kara Lot laughed and said, "A divine hall has appeared. This is quite a matter on the continent, enough to make all the Saint Kings fight to the point of death for it. If I have enough luck, I can take the divine hall for myself, which will also benefit the clan greatly. Kazda Jianxiong, why would you think I wouldn't come when there's such a good opportunity?" The middle-aged man was the ancestor of the Kazda clan, which was one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Empire. Then, Kara Lot looked toward Jian Chen and smiled. "I never thought that brother Jian Chen would be here as well. Fantastic. If brother Jian Chen does not mind, I'm willing to travel with brother Jian Chen, as well as let Li Wei broaden her knowledge in the meantime. Does brother Jian Chen mind?" Kara Li Wei had also discovered Jian Chen in the crowd. She could not help but think of what had happened earlier on the ferry, which caused her face to blush slightly. When she had left the ferry before, she had already left the city of God with the ancestor of the clan, but she never imagined that the Bright Moon Divine Hall would break out as soon as they arrived home. The great activity alarmed Kara Lot, who forced her to come back with him. The Qinhuang kingdom was a subsidiary of the Kara clan, while Jian Chen was an imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom. As a result, he stood with the Kara clan. In other words, Jian Chen had no reason to turn down Kara Lot's request. He agreed straightforwardly before beginning to talk to Kara Lot. Kara Li Wei also recovered her previous state. She arrived at Jian Chen's side with a beaming smile. Then, she chattered with Yu Yu, as she held her hand. They got along well very quickly and giggled from time to time. "Xiangtian, I never thought that you're here as well. This is fantastic. We can travel together as great-grandson and great-grandfather, and I can use that time to introduce you to some matters of the Protector clan, so that you can have some understanding." The great elder of the Changyang clan also arrived beside Jian Chen. Although he was amiable, he stressed great-grandson and great-grandfather when he mentioned it. Jian Chen did not become particularly joyful when he saw this great-grandfather, whose name he did not even know. All he did was agree indifferently, before devoting his attention elsewhere. Jian Chen did not have any great impressions of the people within the Protector Changyang clan besides Changyang Zhu Yunxiao and his wife. Deep within, he did not even accept the fact that he was a member of the Protector clan. The great elder from the Protector clan slightly furrowed his brows when he saw Jian Chen's indifferent attitude. He revealed a sliver of displeasure, but he did not say anything more. The people gathered within the divine hall slowly made their ways into the depths. However, some people seemed to have broadcasted the warning on the table, which caused the saint rulers and heaven saint masters who had initially decided not to take part to surge into the divine hall as well. The people within constantly increase. At the same time, the news of the divine hall and the warning of the tablet spread through the continent like wildfire. It made many experts green with greed as even more saint rulers and heaven saint master used various methods to make their way to the city of God from all directions. A great group of people was currently making their way into the depths of the divine hall in a bold fashion. A large number of heaven saint masters and a few saint rulers would enter every room and hall they passed. The group of people gradually dispersed. A few heaven saint masters and saint rulers ran off to find their own fortunes, while only the saint kings remained gathered together. They steadily advanced into the depth with a cautious and vigilant fashion. They ignored the surrounding rooms. Brother Jian Chen, the most valuable thing here is the cultivation method fairy how you left behind, but treasures like that can only be obtained from the very depths of the hall. It definitely won't be outside, the ancestor of the Kara clan explained to Jian Chen. He passed on the experience and knowledge he had accumulated over several thousand years to Jian Chen, while Kazda Jianxiong would add in a few things from time to time as well. Their intentions for friendship were self-explanatory. The group of them arrived in a huge square where the ceiling was 100 meters above. A huge sculpture stood in the center of the place. It depicted a lady who seemed to be around 20 years of age. Her white clothes made her seem sacred, while her hair was draped on her shoulders. She was extremely pretty, like a goddess from beyond the heavens. She did not seem like an existence that would be present in a mortal realm. This sculpture is undoubtedly Fairy Hao Yu. Fairy Hao Yu sure is a lady worthy of being known as a fairy. She really does look like an otherworldly fairy. Fairy Hao Yu's talent is unprecedented, reaching the peak of Saint Emperor at such a young age. She became the strongest among the Saint Emperors, though it's a pity that she couldn't overcome the final obstacle and break through. She passed away like that. What a pity, what a pity. Many of the Saint Kings stared at the sculpture with mixed emotions, as they discussed. Various emotional sighs and sounds of regret mingled together to form a hubbub. Fairy Hao Yu sure is an unparalleled beauty. Jian Chen stared at the sculpture in a daze as well, as he murmured. Fairy Hao Yu's beauty had completely exceeded the level where it could be praised as devastating. Only the heavenly enchantress could be compared to her out of all the people he had met. At this moment, something suddenly happened. An extremely dense killing intent suddenly appeared, which filled the entire divine hall. It was bone-chillingly cold, and as soon as it appeared, it invaded the bodies of Saint Kings, worming its way into their bone marrow. It seemed to have frozen the center of their bones, and even Jian Chen was unable to avoid it. All the Saint Kings present revealed extremely horrible expressions. Afterward, surging saint force gushed out from within their bodies in an attempt to resist the invasion of the chilling killing intent. Chapter 1043, Saint King Killing Formation, 3, in a grand fashion, terrifying, surging energy erupted in the square within the divine hall. The energies from all the Saint Kings coiled together and immediately transformed into an extremely great force that flooded the surroundings. It knocked all the Saint Rulers and people below Saint Rulers far away. The Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were affected especially heavily. They all vomited blood, as they flew backward. They were all heavily injured, while the fragile Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters had suffered even worse injuries. Jian Chen, He Yu, Hong Lian, Kara Lot, Kazda Jianxiong, and the great elder of the protector Changyang clan gathered together. They all knew Yu Yu and Jian Chen's relationship, so they all worked together without explicit communication to create an energy barrier around Yu Yu and Kara Liwei, which prevented the two of them from being harmed in any way. This should be a method Fairy Hao Yu left behind to deal with Saint Kings in particular. Get the two of them far away from us first, so that we can move without worry. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for us to take care of them once we come across true danger, growled the great elder of the Changyang clan. Brother Jianchen, what do you think? Care-a-lot looked toward Jianchen. Sure. Jianchen hesitated slightly, before directly striking the protective barrier around Yu and Care-a-Liwei. He knocked the two of them far away. The killing intent here is rapidly becoming stronger. If it continues like this, probably even Saint Kings at great perfection will struggle to resist it. This killing intent is odd. It's not purely killing intent. There seems to be something else within it. Once it invades our bodies, it'll wreak havoc like maggots in the bone. Let's advance faster and pass through this region, everyone called out. Afterward, they all used their surrounding saint force to resist the invasion of the killing intent. They continued toward the depths of the divine hall step by step. However, the deeper they traveled, the denser the killing intent became. Some first heavenly layer Saint Kings even began to struggle with resisting the killing intent. Jianchen did not emit energy like the everyone else. He created a protective barrier on the surface on his body to resist the killing intent and expanded the chaotic force within him to fill every inch. He completely utilized the advantages of the chaotic body, which made resistance even easier. The weird killing intent permeating the divine hall could not break through his body's defenses at all. Jianchen looked around at the others, and a sliver of suspicion appeared on his face. Even Saint Kings found it rather difficult to resist this killing intent, let alone Saint Rulers. If Saint Rulers had entered this region, they would definitely fail to resist the invasion of the killing intent and die. They would not be able to pass through the place. So why did Fairy Haoyu leave such a warning on the tablet? Perhaps Fairy Haoyu just didn't want the divine hall she spent so much effort into crafting to fall into the hands of others, which was why she cast down this killing formation here to prevent the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors? And that it's not that those below Saint King can enter the divine hall safely, but their strength is just too weak, so they do not catch the fairy's attention? Maybe that was why she did not explain it on the tablet? Jianchen analyzed inside. He already began to doubt whether everyone had misinterpreted the tablet. If the killing formation did not affect those below Saint King, why would he be faced with the attacks of such a powerful killing intent? After all, his comprehension remained at the seventh heavenly layer of Saint Ruler. Only his prowess in battle reached the level of Saint Kings. At this moment, a barrier silently appeared. It was extremely large and not a normal white. Instead, it was a silvery moonlight condensed from moonlight force. It filled the entire hall and enveloped Jianchen's group as well as the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters behind. Moonlight force immediately began to surge within the barrier. It condensed into countless sword chi that fell like rain that traveled toward all the people within the area with unbelievable speed. This included the Saint Rulers, Heaven Saint Masters, and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. With this, Yu, Care-a-Liwei, and the other experts all changed drastically in expression. Despair filled the eyes of many people. This was an ability from a formation a Saint Emperor cast down, so its strength was self-evident. How could they resist it? Crap. Jianchen's expression changed drastically. He used the illusory flash and shot toward Yu at his greatest speed. At the same time, the Saint artifact shot out from the center of his eyebrows and transformed into a huge golden tower in the blink of an eye. It shot toward Yu and wanted to approach her. Then, it could suck her into the artifact space. If the Saint artifact wanted to suck away someone, it needed to be within a suitable proximity. However, the Moonlight Force sword chi were just too fast, much faster than Jianchen and the Saint artifact. Before they could even approach Yu, the sword chi had struck. "You Jianchen cried out. He was utterly enraged and filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have sucked Yu into the artifact space long ago. At the same time, Jianchen shook violently. Over 10 sword chi had struck him at the same time, but they were only as strong as attacks from Saint Kings of the first heavenly layer. It could not break through the defense of his chaotic body, so they splattered apart like eggs as soon as they struck him. They recondensed into moonlight force and did not disperse. Jian Chen also arrived beside Yu Yu. However, just when he wanted to send her into the artifact space, he suddenly became stunned. He stared blankly at Yu Yu as disbelief flooded her face. Yu Yu stood there with panic in her eyes, yet she was completely fine. She was unharmed. Yu Yu, you are fine? Jian Chen asked in surprise. He had personally experienced the power of the sword Qi, and every single one of them was as powerful as a strike from a first heavenly layer Saint King. An attack like that was extremely fatal to someone with Yu Yu's level of strength. Kara Liwei also stood there, still badly shaken. She could not help but break into laughter when she saw just how much concern Jian Chen had for Yu Yu. She patted her chest and said, "Yang Yutian, I never thought that you'd care for your fiancé so much. Don't worry, we're fine." Yu Yu warmed up inside when she saw Jian Chen's expression. She smiled sweetly and said, "Jian Chen, don't worry. I'm fine. The sword Qi from before doesn't seem to be able to harm us. Remember the warning on the tablet? These attacks won't affect anyone below Saint King." Jian Chen looked around and realized that everyone weaker than Saint King remained unharmed. Other than a few people injured from the eruption of energy from the Saint Kings, no one else suffered any injuries. Jian Chen came to a realization when he saw this. The warning on the tablet was indeed true. The formations within the Bright Moon Divine Hall indeed could not injure people below Saint King. Although he was still technically a saint ruler, he could display the strength of Saint Kings, which was why the formations recognized him as a Saint King. "Jian Chen, be careful. The sword Qi has condensed again," Yu Yu warned. Jian Chen paid no attention to the sword Qi. The 30-meter-tall saint artifact floated above him. Then, he said to the two of them, "Do you two want to enter the saint artifact? Jian Chen, it's not like we'll be harmed if we stay here, so why don't we stay outside? I've never witnessed such a major matter before." Yu Yu turned down Jian Chen's suggestion. Jian Chen hesitated slightly on that, but he still agreed with Yu Yu in the end. He did not force Yu Yu into the artifact space, but he did hand the saint artifact over to Yu Yu. He secretly ordered the artifact spirit to immediately suck the two of them away once they faced danger. The sword Qi condensed from moonlight force once again and shot toward everyone like a blanket. All the Saint Kings used various abilities to resist the sword Qi attacks. As Jian Chen had the chaotic body, he was able to resist against attacks from third heavenly layer Saint Kings. Unless they reached the fourth heavenly layer, they would not be able to break through his body at all, which was why he had it the easiest out of everyone present. However, Jian Chen could clearly feel that the attack this time was much more powerful than before after the densely packed sword Qi struck him. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. Sword Qi had struck a first heavenly layer Saint King, and tremendous energy began to float unceasingly from within his body. All of it dispersed in the Divine Hall in the end. "Shit, this bloody moonlight force is devouring my energy," the person cried out in horror. He began to panic. The complexions of all the Saint Kings present changed, becoming extremely horrible. Chapter 1044, Saint King Killing Formation. 4. The Saint Force within that first heavenly layer Saint King leaked out rapidly and floated out into the moonlight barrier. It was refined into moonlight force very quickly, which strengthened the barrier. This can't continue. The more Saint Force you radiate, the stronger the barrier becomes. You need to leave here as soon as possible, called out a great elder of a protector clan. If all of your Saint Force gets devoured, you won't be able to leave even if you are a Saint King. You better leave quickly while you still have some remaining energy, someone within the crowd tried to persuade him. If the Saint Force continued to be refined into moonlight force, it would be extremely detrimental to everyone. The Saint King's complexion had already become the color of moonlight, extremely pale. Under everyone's insistence, he hesitated slightly before he stood up in a trembling fashion. He made his way toward the barrier with a face filled with unwillingness and regret, as he poured all his energy into suppressing the moonlight force within him, in an attempt to reduce the speed at that his saint force got devoured. He made his way to the barrier very quickly, but just when he wanted to leave, the barrier obstructed him. "Da!" The Saint King immediately roared out, as he struck the barrier as hard as he could with the curved blade in his hand. However, the barrier did not even end up trembling. The moonlight force in the sky began to condense once more into densely packed sword chi. It radiated with a great pressure that flooded the divine hall. At the same time, the odd killing intent that invaded their bodies appeared again, and it actually merged into the sword chi strand by strand. It powered up the sword chi. The second heavenly layer. The attacks this time are as powerful as a second heavenly layer Saint King, a Saint King warned the crowd. As soon as he finished his words, the sword chi began to fall and blanketed down on everyone. Jian Chen stood straight where he was, unmoving like a mountain. He allowed the sword chi to strike his body, which had turned his clothes to shreds long ago. His body became littered with white marks that were all due to the sword chi. Another few miserable shrieks rang out. The sword chi was just too tightly packed, so it injured a few more weaker Saint Kings. Weird moonlight force was deposited into their bodies, as it began to devour their saint force. From afar, a group of saint rulers and heaven saint masters stared at this in surprise. In their eyes, Saint Kings were supreme existences, people who stood at the apex. They held illustrious statuses and received the admiration of everyone. Many of them found it quite difficult to believe now that so many Saint Kings had fallen into such horrible shapes. After all, it was the first time for many of the heaven saint masters and a few of the saint rulers who had entered the divine hall to see a Saint King. The sword chi is constantly becoming stronger. If this continues, it'll become strong to the point where we can't resist it very soon. We can't just sit and wait for that to happen. We need to break through the barrier as soon as possible, called out a Saint King. Immediately, around a dozen Saint Kings drew their saint weapons. Tremendous saint force surged wildly within the barrier, before striking the barrier at the same time. Boom! Terrifying energy ripples pushed the heaven saint masters and saint rulers backward, while the fragile class 6 radiant saint masters suffered quite some heavy damage. However, Yu Yu and Kara Liwei did not sustain any damage, as they had the protection of the saint artifact. After taking on the combined attack from more than 10 Saint Kings, the barrier immediately began to shake violently. However, it did not shatter. What a powerful barrier, a Saint King could not help but exclaim. He became much sterner. The saint rulers and people below Saint Ruler backed off some more, as they almost stuck to the barrier. All the injured heaven saint masters sat with their legs crossed, as they healed their wounds. Meanwhile, a milky white light surrounded the class 6 radiant saint masters. They were using radiant saint force to heal their wounds. The moonlight force within the barrier immediately began to churn after the barrier resisted the combined attack from the Saint Kings. It condensed into densely packed sword chi in the sky once more, though there were much fewer than before. However, its power had drastically increased. Swish! 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 With a series of ear-piercing sounds, the sword chi rained upon them with unbelievable speed. Although the number had lessened, it was still like a blanket. No one could dodge it, so they were only able to forcefully resist it. After the wave of attacks, the sword chi struck 3 more Saint Kings. Although their wounds were not life-threatening, the moonlight force was extremely weird. The residue in their bodies began to devour their saint force. Regardless of how hard they tried, they could not purge it, which forced them to devote all their power into resisting it and slowing down the dissipation of their saint force. This wave of sword chi has already reached the 3rd heavenly layer. If it continues like this, the next wave should be at the 4th heavenly layer, and then the 5th, the 6th, and so on. It'll go on forever, until all of us die here. If we let that happen, we will all die. No one will be able to survive. Everyone, do not hold back. Strike the barrier with all your strength. The speakers were 2 ancestors from ancient clans. This time, everyone decided to contribute. They gathered all their power to strike at the same time, and they sent an earth-shaking attack at the barrier. Jian Chen had also drawn his emperor armament and struck the barrier as soon as he could. Resisting this wave of attacks was already the limits of his chaotic body. If he did not break through the barrier, the next wave would be able to pierce his body. Although he had no idea if the moonlight force could devour his chaotic force, it was not something he wanted to risk. Boom! The combined attacks of all the Saint Kings finally broke through the extremely tough barrier, reducing it into dense strands of moonlight force that floated around the Divine Hall. Everyone would not help but smile slightly in relief now that they had destroyed the barrier. However, before long, a cold voice boomed out in the empty space. Those who have not heeded the warning, take responsibility for your actions. With that, streaks of bright and pure moonlight suddenly appeared. It shone blindingly like sunlight as 9 balls of light floated above the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu in the center of the area. Each ball of light shone with bright moonlight. From afar, it seemed like 9 small moons. Rumble. The Divine Hall began to shake violently. One of the moons that floated above the sculpture suddenly began to enlarge and shine with dazzling light. Everyone could not help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes once more, the scene before them had already completely changed. The familiar Divine Hall had disappeared and a desolate land now replaced it. There was nothing as far as the eye could see except for dry earth. All the Saint Kings changed in expression when they saw this. They had all realized that they had fallen into another formation. Everyone had fallen into it, including the first heavenly layer Saint King who was injured at the very start. It could be said that all the Saint Kings that had entered the Divine Hall had gathered in this formation once more. Is this landscape the moon? The great elder from the Changyang clan looked around in interest, as he said with surprise and suspicion. It doesn't matter if this landscape is the moon or not. We need to break out as soon as possible, as it definitely can't be safe. And that sudden voice back then, was that Fairy Hao Yu's voice? A great elder from the Yuan sect said with a sunken face. Uneasiness filled his eyes. Many people could not but change in expression when they heard that, but someone rebuked very quickly. Fairy Hao Yu passed away in meditation several tens of thousand years ago, so it's impossible for her to still be alive. She must have left behind that voice back then. At this moment, a mysterious suction silently appeared. It gathered around the people and slowly pulled out their saint force. Everyone immediately changed in expression. They all sat down quickly and poured all their strength into resisting the suction. However, they failed to stop the expansion of their saint force no matter how hard they tried. Jian Chen also felt the weird, mysterious force gathering around him, as if it was drawing the chaotic force within him outward. His chaotic force also began to show signs of movement, as if it had broken free of his control and was drifting outward. However, chaotic force could not be compared to saint force in the end. Under Jian Chen's control, the chaotic force immediately calmed down and did not expand outward like the saint force of the Saint Kings. What a weird formation and force. I actually can't prevent the energy within me from expanding. If that's the case, let me break through this formation. I'd like to see if it can resist a strike from me. Hei Yu raised his head and his gaze sharpened. A slivery white machete appeared in his right hand, radiating with a chilling pressure. It was a weapon with origin energy. Just with that weapon, Hei Yu could deal attacks as strong as Saint Emperors and fight hand in hand with them. At the very top of the Divine Hall, there was an extremely pretty and illusory woman that currently sat on a pure white piece of jade within a completely sealed room. Her eyes were closed but suddenly, she became surprised. Her eyes snapped open, and she cried out involuntarily, "Origin energy! This is origin energy! How is this possible? How can origin energy exist in this world? Wasn't all the origin energy sealed up in the distant void of space? How can this energy exist here?" The illusory woman stood up from the piece of jade, and her emotions began to churn. She was not calm in any way, and even excitement seemed to have appeared on her illusory face. Chapter 1045, Saint King Killing Formation, 5. Yu shot into the sky with his origin energy machete, and he chopped at the sky with lightning speed. A magnificent ray appeared. It shot through the sky as if it could destroy the surroundings and immediately caused the space of the formation to violently tremble. Yu's machete had not even struck the formation, yet it had suffered great disruptions and showed signs of breaking apart. All the Saint Kings trapped in the formation stared unblinkingly at Yu. Their faces burned with greed and hope. There was no one present that Yu's powerful origin energy weapon did not tempt, but none of them had the courage to try and steal it. He has finally personally moved. How can this mere formation stop us, since he's someone who can even go up against Saint Emperors? All the Saint Kings who knew Yu's strength showed expression of relief. None of them believed the formation could withstand Yu's attack, as it was just too mighty. They all shivered inside just by standing to one side. At the same time, the illusory woman's eyes immediately lit up in the sealed room at the top of the divine hall. She said, "How can you people break through the illusory formation of 9 moons I personally cast down? I may not be able to use the full strength of the formation due to the limitations of my strength, but it's still not something Saint Emperors can break through. Even experts in the origin realm will need to expend a great effort to break through it. 9 moons as one." The woman formed a seal with her hands, which constantly changed before her chest. Immediately, the 8 other smaller moons that floated above the sculpture fused with the first moon and completely became one. All the people below Saint King stood blankly afar, as they watched everything unfold. To them, they had completely lost sight of the Saint Kings. An extremely huge moon stood in the previous location of the Saint Kings. It seemed extremely like the moon, illuminating the entire area with moonlight. The moon originated from the formation, which was extremely profound. The area within the formation was an independent space that trapped all the Saint Kings. Within the formation space, Yu's machete viciously struck the barrier of the formation. However, now that the 9 moons had fused as one, the formation's power had greatly increased. It was nowhere as weak as before, so Yu's attack on the level of Saint Emperors could only cause it to tremble gently after he struck. It stabilized very soon and did not shatter. This is impossible. All of the hopeful Saint Kings changed in expression when they witnessed this, as they immediately cried out. Disbelief filled all of them. This clearly stunned Yu as well. He lowered his head to look at his machete as disbelief clouded his eyes. The formation has suddenly become much more powerful. With its current strength, probably even Saint Emperors will struggle to break through it, Hong Lian said from beside Jian Chen. Her eyes had already become red, as if 2 balls of flames burned inside. She was using a secret technique to observe the formation. Crap! The formation has strengthened greatly, and the energy within me is leaking out at a great speed, someone cried out. All the Saint Kings present bathed in a thick layer of Saint Force, as their energy leaked from their bodies at a rate several dozen times faster than before. Then, their Saint Force dispersed in the surroundings. The mysterious suction force present in the formation space drew it out. Yu and Hong Lian were not spared from it either. No one could stop it. Jian Chen's complexion also became rather horrible. Now that the suction force had grown, the chaotic force that he had just stabilized began to lose control again. Strands of it flowed outward uncontrollably, except it was nowhere near as fast as the Saint Force in the Saint Kings. Strands of weak, gray energy appeared around Jianchen. An aura of destruction filled it, which was extremely different from the energies within the other Saint Kings. All the Saint Kings naturally detected Jianchen's chaotic force, but no one paid attention to the unique chaotic force, as they were struggling just for themselves. A sliver of panic appeared in Jianchen's eyes. Chaotic force was extremely difficult to replenish. He could not afford an overconsumption of chaotic force. Suddenly, Jianchen roared at the sky. His eyes shone, as he poured all his strength into controlling the chaotic force. It immediately stopped flowing outward under his control, and the chaotic force around him also began to approach him bit by bit. It eventually returned into his body in the end. Odd. Just what is this power? I can clearly feel the greatness of this power, but why have I never seen it before? The illusory woman murmured in the room at the very top of the divine hall. She furrowed her brows in thought. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something. Her eyes immediately lit up, and disbelief filled her face. She said, "I remember my father once mentioned a powerful energy called chaotic force. Why does the characteristics of this energy match up with the chaotic force my father mentioned? Is this chaotic force?" However, the woman suddenly shook her head. Impossible. How can chaotic force appear in this world? Isn't this a great power that only people in that world can cultivate? Chapter 1046, Fight for the Divine Hall. 1. Xiao Bai wants to take the Saint Artifact in. If that was possible, it could store Jianchen and the others into the artifact. Then, it can bring them out. It's a pity that the Saint Artifact can't enter, Yu murmured softly. She had understood the White Tiger's intentions very quickly. The Saint Artifact spun, as it shone with a hazy golden light by the side of the formation, before returning to the air above Yu. It needed to keep Yu safe. In the formation space, the White Tiger opened its mouth. It knew that the Saint Artifact did not enter the formation with it, and it immediately growled at the formation. It seemed to be filled with frustration. Jianchen understood the familiar White Tiger's intentions at first thought after he saw its behavior. He said, "Xiao Bai, the formation that traps us is just too powerful. We can't break it even when we all work together. All we can do now is wait for someone outside to gain control of the Divine Hall, which will allow them to control the Divine Hall as well. Immediately take Yu and Kara Liwei into the depths of the Divine Hall, to the control center." The White Tiger looked at Jianchen, as he worked hard to control his chaotic force, and worry appeared in its eyes. Afterward, it produced a deep growl, as if it had agreed to Jianchen's instructions. "Xiao Bai, tell the artifact spirit after you get out to not let Senior Rui Jin out no matter what. Keep him in the artifact space, until you leave the Divine Hall. Also, Xia Wang, who followed me in the Sea Realm, is still cultivating inside the artifact space. Get the artifact spirit to contact him and get him to protect you all as you venture into the depths." Jianchen gave a long list of orders to the White Tiger. Whether the people trapped in the formation could leave would completely depend on the people outside. If they failed, all the Saint Kings inside would die. The White Tiger left the artifact space with Jianchen's words. It arrived outside and recounted everything that Jianchen had said, word by word, to the artifact spirit. Although the White Tiger could not speak human tongue, the artifact spirit could understand him since he was a spirit. He immediately informed Yu and Kara Liwei of Jianchen's current situation. Yu immediately paled when she learned that Jianchen was currently in danger. Her face was filled with anxiety and deep worry, as she lost her normal composure. Kara Liwei was also anxious, but she tried as hard as she could to keep her composure. She comforted Yu, "Sister Yu, don't worry. Don't we still have ways to save Jianchen? As long as we find the control center of the Divine Hall, we'll be able to save Jianchen without him suffering any harm at all." Yu tightly clenched her jade-like hands. Her palms were sweaty. Although there was still a way for them to save Jian Chen, how were they supposed to pass through the many obstacles of the Divine Hall to reach the control center with these brutal saint rulers? The White Tiger had already entered the saint artifact and told Ruo Jin about what had happened outside. Ruo Jin was still currently filling the 3 flaming Jadites with energy. Immediately, he stopped what he was doing when he learned about what was happening outside, and he furrowed his brows. Ruo Jin, there's only one way to save Master, and that's to get the mistress to gain control over the Divine Hall and shut down the formation. Master plans to call a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler from the sea race to go out and assist mistress in controlling the Divine Hall, but I just don't trust this person. Once he leaves the artifact space, I can't do anything to him either. I've come to you especially this time to leave a restriction within that person, just in case, the artifact spirit said to Ruo Jin. Ruo Jin agreed without any extra thought. There are many secret techniques of my dragon clan, and there are quite a few among them for controlling people. Bring that sea race person over. Xiaofan was currently in seclusion, as he practiced the Octaterra Emperor's cultivation method. The artifact spirit forcefully roused him and sent him to Ruo Jin's side. Xiaofan, Master has orders for you to immediately leave this space and assist the mistress in taking this divine hall. However, to prevent you from going overboard in some areas, we need to leave a restriction within you. As long as you focus on assisting the mistress, nothing will happen to you, the artifact summarized. He explained the task as well as the rough situation outside to Xiaofan, so that he could have some understanding. Xiaowan's eyes immediately lit up when he heard about the Bright Moon Divine Hall. He understood the power of divine halls extremely well, and knew that once someone possessed a divine hall, they could go up against 16th star experts. No one could threaten the owner of the divine hall in any way given that they did not come across emperors. Although the Bright Moon Divine Hall tempted Xiaofan, he dismissed these thoughts very quickly and calmed down. He still remembers his current situation, so he forcefully suppressed his itching desire. He said, "Don't worry. I, Xiaofan, am not a person who returns kindness with animosity. Since Jian Chen gave me the invaluable cultivation method of the Octaterra Emperor without even hesitating, I will never do anything that betrays Jian Chen in this life. If I do, I am willing to suffer the punishment of utter annihilation," Xiaofan said righteously. His tone was extremely resolute. "Just in case, I will be leaving a restriction within you. If you really do something unaccounted for, I will wipe out your soul in an instant. I will personally remove it after you've accomplished your task." Ruo Jin stared at Xiaofan with bright eyes. Although Xiaofan had never seen Ruo Jin before, Ruo Jin was definitely someone that belonged on Jian Chen's side since he could appear here. He could even vaguely feel a pressure that made him shiver, which allowed him to know that the middle-aged man before him was definitely a powerful and terrifying expert. Xiaofan did not show any resistance toward Ruo Jin's intentions of planting a restriction within him. He accepted it calmly, as he had no other choice. Afterward, Ruo Jin planted a restriction on Xiaowan's soul through a secret technique of the Dragon Clan. Xiaowan's life was basically in Ruo Jin's hand with the restriction, as Ruo Jin only needed a single thought to wipe out Xiaowan's soul if he did anything unexpected. Xiaofan and the White Tiger left the artifact space together and appeared beside Yu Yu. Yu Yu had already learned of Xiaowan's identity in detail from the artifact spirit, so she did not become surprised when she saw him. She only observed him curiously, as this was her first time meeting a member of the sea race. "Is this Jian Chen's woman? I never thought that her strength would be this bad." Xiaofan observed Yu Yu curiously as well, and he immediately felt a sliver of surprise when he saw her strength. Yu Yu greets Senior Xiaofan. "I shall be in your care." Yu Yu greeted Xiaofan politely with a bow and did not refer to him in the casual fashion that Jian Chen did. Xiaofan gained a good impression of Yu Yu with how she behaved. He laughed aloud and said, "You're Jian Chen's woman, so you're not an outsider anyway. There's no need for us to be so polite," so just spare the terms of seniority. Just call me Xia Wang. Xia Wang and Yu spoke some more, before focusing on the main problem. Afterward, they left for the depths of the Divine Hall with the White Tiger and Kara Liwei. Quite a few Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters had already entered the depths before them when Yu's group had left. There were also some Heaven Saint Masters and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters who had given up on that idea and directly backed out of the Divine Hall. They spread the news of all the trapped Saint Kings in the Divine Hall at the same time. There were still quite a lot of people floating in the cool night sky outside the Divine Hall. This included the people from the Radiant Saint Master, such as the President and the Grand Elder. As Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters, they did not enter the Divine Hall. Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters enjoyed exalted statuses on the Tianyuan continent, which were in no shape or form below Saint Kings. Also, they never took part in any of the killings and battles on the continent, so the Bright Moon Divine Hall did not possess any great use to them. They did not have the need at all to risk their lives and compete for the Divine Hall. What? All the Saint Kings that entered have been trapped? The people from the Union and the other people in the crowd all changed in expressions when they heard this news. They all felt rather perturbed, as the fear in their gazes toward the Divine Hall deepened. The formation of the Divine Hall only targets Saint Kings and those beyond Saint King. Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers are resistant to the attacks of the Divine Hall, a Heaven Saint Master who had exited said loudly. With that, the Saint King who had just hurried over through space gates and were about to enter the Divine Hall immediately halted. They became torn between surprise and suspicion. Suddenly, his eyes froze and he stared fixedly at the roof of the Divine Hall. A middle-aged man in white robes stood proudly at the highest point of the Divine Hall. No one knew exactly when he had appeared. The man seemed to have fused with the surrounding space, becoming a part of the surroundings. No one actually discovered him, as he stood in such a brazen fashion on top of the Divine Hall other than the Saint King. He seemed to be transparent, which made it extremely easy for people to miss him. The Path Lord of Carnal Desires. The Saint King recognized the man at first glance, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. In that moment, the evil-looking face of the Path Lord was rather pale. He stood rather haggardly on the top of the Divine Hall, as he mumbled to himself, "Fairy, how you sure is extravagant to collect material from the moon to build such a powerful Divine Hall. The moonlight force within this Divine Hall is weird and powerful. Also, the toughness of the Divine Hall cannot be compared with any ordinary Divine Hall. Even if I want to break through it, it'll be extremely difficult. It's a pity that the Origin energy injured me last time. Origin energy is just too powerful. I can't recover in such a short amount of time, and my strength is greatly reduced. Otherwise, I'd like to see what Fairy How You had prepared all those years ago in the Divine Hall," the Path Lord said with some regret. Afterward, he vanished. Chapter 1047, Fight for the Divine Hall, 2. As the news of how the Bright Moon Divine Hall prohibited the entry of Saint Kings broke out, all the Saint Rulers and some Heaven Saint Masters could no longer resist their teeming desires. They all excitedly charged into the Divine Hall. Since all the Saint Kings within the Divine Hall were now trapped, they were the most powerful people as Saint Rulers. This reignited the flames of hope within these Saint Rulers, as if the Bright Moon Divine Hall was now just right before them, waiting for them to take it. As these people entered, the number of people within the Divine Hall constantly increased. There were people as powerful as the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler, and people as weak as newly broken through Heaven Saint Masters. Half of the Saint Rulers from the Radiant Saint Master Union had entered the Divine Hall as well. However, none of the Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters entered. Instead, they all remained outside and waited. They did not leave though, as they wanted to anticipate the person that the Divine Hall ended up with in the end. Yu and Kara Liwei made their way toward the depths of the Divine Hall under the protection of Xia Wang and the White Tiger. The palm-sized saint artifact followed behind them closely and remained above Yu Yu's head at all times. On the highest floor of the divine hall, the illusory woman remained seated on the pure white piece of jade with her eyes closed. Everything that went on in the divine hall was under her control. The woman slowly opened her eyes. She appeared to be in thought, as she mumbled, "Originally, I wanted to attract some geniuses in here so I could take their bodies. Then, I can cultivate from the start again, but it seems like there is no need to do that at all with the look of things right now. There's already an even better option. That works as well. The origin energy in this world has been sealed up. Even if I take a body for myself, I won't be able to break through Saint Emperor and reach the origin realm. However, the chaotic body is not similarly limited. However, who set down that formation in the distant outer space? Why did they seal up origin energy? It's a pity that the formation is just too powerful. I can't break through it at all, or how would how you, end up in a state like this? The layout of the divine hall was extremely complicated. Hallways intersected again and again, which made it extremely easy for people to get lost. It was like a maze. Yu Yu and the others became lost very quickly. They traveled recklessly through the intersecting hallways and the tunnels that would appear from time to time. They hoped that they could find the correct way. They had tried leaving down marks in places where they had traveled through, but it was impossible to leave a mark anywhere within the divine hall. It all depended on luck whether they could make it out or not. They would come across a few heaven saint masters and saint rulers from time to time, as they made their way through the maze-like hallways, but no conflict ensured. There would also be some saint rulers who wanted to join Yu Yu's party, but they were all turned down. They had been trapped within here for 3 whole days before they finally found the correct way out. They arrived on the 2nd floor, but did not come across any dangers during that time. It seemed like the divine hall did not possess dangers that targeted saint rulers and those below. In these 3 days, saint rulers and heaven saint masters constantly entered the divine hall from outside. The number of people within the divine hall grew to several thousand, though most of them were heaven saint masters. The news of the trapped saint kings had already spread to the 10 protector clans and various ancient clans, which immediately shocked them greatly. The protector clans viewed this with great importance. The saint kings immediately hurried from the protector clans. They stopped outside, as they discussed the methods to save them with their brows furrowed. Even saint kings from Mercenary City had personally come. Within the formation space of the divine hall, the trapped saint kings remained seated on the floor. All of them worked hard to suppress the leakage of their energy. He Yu and Hong Lian both equipped their origin energy armors, which could drag it out a little even though it could not completely stop the leakage. A few weaker saint kings had already begun to pale. They trembled slightly, as they sat on the ground. They were clearly suffering quite a lot. The saint kings that the sword chi had struck outside in particular had already powerlessly collapsed on the ground. Their eyes were dull and filled with despair, as their bodies had already lost all their energy. The loss of energy could not lead to them losing their level of cultivation. Even with all their energy gone, they could just replenish it outside, and they would return to how they were before without much time. However, saint kings without any of their energy were extremely weak. Particularly in this odd formation space, their abilities as saint kings had been restricted and they could not use spatial and world force, so it reduced them to ordinary people. Among all the people, the only person who did not have energy leaking out was Jian Chen. The power and uniqueness of chaotic force were just incomparable to ordinary energy. However, Jian Chen still needed to devote all his strength into suppressing it even though that was the case. I hope you can successfully obtain the divine hall, or all of us trapped here will just be waiting for our deaths, Jian Chen prayed inside. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. During that time, countless people entered the divine hall, and people could be seen everywhere within it. However, most of them were heaven saint masters. During that period of time, Yu Yu's group had already passed through 8 floors of mazes and arrived on the 9th floor of the Divine Hall. Undoubtedly, the surface area of the 9th floor was much smaller than the floors below. It seemed more like an extremely large hall when gazing out. There were 9 huge stone pillars with simple carvings that held up the ceiling. Vague moonlight force revolved around each pillar and radiated with a tremendous pressure. The hall was beautifully decorated. All the stone tables, seats, and various ornaments were carved from the same type of jade. Every single item was extremely exquisite. It was impossible to estimate their value. A mighty but extravagant throne hovered in the air at the end of the hall. On the throne lay a 2-meter-long, exquisitely crafted scepter that shone with a moonlight haze. It was extremely pleasant to the eye. Yu Yu's party were not the first people to arrive. Before them, various saint rulers and a few heaven saint masters had already arrived. Although the hall was not packed, there were several hundred people that had already gathered at the very least. All of them stared at the staff on the throne with bright eyes, and no one made any noise. The atmosphere was extremely weird. Although the treasure was right before them, no one went ahead to take it. All the people who could arrive here were very clever. They knew that the first person to go up for the treasure would be the first one to suffer from all the attacks of the people present. Even 9th heavenly layer saint rulers would struggle greatly to leave with their lives intact. That staff definitely is not so simple. It might be hiding some secret. You never know. And that throne is not your ordinary, everyday object either. Xiaofan stared unblinkingly at the throne, as he said with a soft voice. Roar! The white tiger narrowed its eyes, as they shone with a threatening light. It immediately took a leap and turned into a blur that shot toward the throne. It viewed the several hundred saint rulers and heaven saint master that had gathered as nothing. Xiaofan did not charge up with him. Instead, he remained close to Yu Yu and Kara Liwei to protect him. He kept loyal to his task, to protect the two of them. That's the winged tiger god. The winged tiger god wants to take the scepter. Quick, stop it, the scepter must hide the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. It might even be the object that can directly control the Divine Hall. We can't let the winged tiger god obtain it. Whoever gains the scepter will be the one who controls the Divine Hall. The white tiger's actions shattered the odd atmosphere in the Divine Hall. At that moment, no one hesitated anymore, as they all charged toward the scepter at their top speeds. The white tiger at the very front also became the target of everyone's attacks, where more than 20 saint rulers sent powerful sword chi at it with a wave of their hands at the same time. Before the great temptation of the Divine Hall and the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu, they all lost their minds. The fact that the white tiger was the winged tiger god no longer bothered them. Chapter 1048, Fight for the Divine Hall, 3, over 20 sword chi from saint rulers shot toward the white tiger, as they radiated with powerful ripples of energy. In order to stop the white tiger from getting close to the throne, none of the saint rulers held back. The white tiger's eyes remained fixed on the scepter. It did not even look at the sword chi behind it. When the sword chi almost struck, the white tiger abruptly began to enlarge and turned into a 10-meter-long white tiger in an instant. It unfurled its huge, white wings, while a great energy seemed to be secretly charging up. Whoosh! With the sound of a wild gust, the huge wings of the white tiger suddenly flapped backward. 2 huge whirlwinds immediately formed and quickly collided with the sword chi from behind. After it enlarged, the speed of the white tiger skyrocketed. It shot toward the scepter like an arrow, several times faster than before. The powerful sword chi collided with the whirlwinds the white tiger produced. With a muffled boom, the sword chi all shattered into pieces from the spinning wind, and the whirlwinds continued onward without dispersing after blocking the attacks. The whirlwinds obstructed the saint rulers that pursued behind the white tiger, which allowed it to approach the huge, hovering throne successfully. There was nothing protecting the throne, so the white tiger leaped onto it without coming across any obstructions. It gripped the scepter with its mouth, before returning along its previous route. It leaped in Yu Yu's direction in the form of a faint blur. The winged tiger god has taken the scepter. Quick, steal it back, Fairy Hao Yu's treasure is right before our eyes. Quickly stop the winged tiger god. Whoever who gets the scepter will be the one who obtains a fortuitous encounter. With the scepter taken, all the people immediately began to churn. There were a few people who were unwilling to see the scepter taken just like that before them. So, they fanned on everyone, as they stood on the ground. Everyone had become green with greed. In that moment, all the saint rulers within the hall began to move. They encircled the white tiger with extremely great teamwork and surrounded it from all directions. There were more than 10 saint weapons that shot through the air with powerful ripples of energy, chopping toward the huge body of the tiger with lightning speed. Accompanying them was another wave of over 20 sword chi. The attacks formed a shapeless net in the air that sealed out all routes of escape for the white tiger, as the attacks fell down like a blanket. The white tiger stopped mid-air awe-inspiringly. It looked around with a threatening light in its eyes, before throwing its head up. It tossed the scepter high up into the air, which allowed it to open its mouth and produce an earth-shaking roar. Immediately, visible sound waves quickly began to expand with the white tiger as the epicenter. The sound wave possessed an unimaginable force. When it collided with the saint weapons of the saint kings and the sword chi, all the sword chi dissipated, while the saint weapons in the hands of the saint rulers trembled violently. It seemed like an invisible force was stopping their advance, which not only made it extremely difficult for them to continue onward, but also forced them backward constantly. The sound wave expanded extremely quickly and covered the entire room very soon. It swept past everyone and immediately reduced all their clothes to shreds, forcing them into a horrible shape. Miserable cries rang through the entire room. The white tiger's roar possessed the might of a beast god, so it possessed a penetrative characteristic. It could injure the souls of people. The heaven saint masters all shrieked, as they clutched their heads painfully due to their weaker souls. Only saint rulers could endure it, but even for them, they showed signs of pain. It still affected their souls greatly. The white tiger's strength was not at the peak of Class 7, but it was a winged tiger god after all. It possessed inherited memories and could learn powerful abilities, while its battle prowess was shocking. Just the might of its roar was enough to shock many 9th heavenly layer saint rulers. The combined attacks from several dozen saint rulers collapsed from the roar. The white tiger did not continue to bother with them. It caught the scepter, as it fell down. Then, it bounded toward Yu Yu. Leave the scepter, or you won't be leaving today. The saint rulers recovered extremely quickly and courageously charged toward white tiger. All of them had lost their calm before the temptation. Their only desire was to obtain the scepter. In that moment, the white tiger had become the enemy of everyone. All the saint rulers took part in restricting the white tiger's movements, striking the white tiger without holding back at all. They were attempting to kill it. Afar, a few saint rulers even began to charge up their saint-tier battle skills. The white tiger seemed to be agitated as well. It growled deeply as dense killing intent flickered through its vicious eyes. It charged threateningly toward a few saint rulers that blocked its way, as it flapped its wings violently. It shot out powerful wind blades at them. The saint rulers all knew how powerful the winged tiger god was. They faced it as a powerful enemy. They swung their saint weapons as fast as they could, as they chopped at the wind blades. Boom! The wind blades and saint weapons collided, which immediately produced a powerful ripple of energy. The wind blades dispersed, while the powerful force of the collision and the wave of energy knocked back the saint rulers. They all quickly shot backward. At this moment, around a dozen saint rules that shot over from the sides approached the white tiger as well. All their saint weapons shone with a blinding light, as they chopped through the space. They were approaching the white tiger with lightning speed. The white tiger's fur began to glow with a hazy white light, as it blocked the full-powered attacks from the Saint rulers with its wings. When the Saint weapons landed on the wings, all of the Saint rulers felt like their lightning-fast attack had landed on soft cotton. The surging Saint force hidden within their Saint weapons completely disappeared in that moment. "Crap, its wings have absorbed the energy on our Saint weapons," a Saint ruler cried out. He was filled with disbelief. After absorbing the energies from more than 10 Saint weapons, the wings no longer remained so white. A few extra colors appeared. However, in the next moment, the wings suddenly jolted, and the energy absorbed from the Saint weapons immediately poured out like a flood. It knocked all of the Saint rulers that had approached far away. At this moment, a pressure that seemed to originate from the world suddenly appeared. It locked tightly onto the white tiger, which caused the space around the white tiger to thicken. It's a Saint-tier battle skill. Move away. Sensing the frightening pressure, all the Saint rulers changed in expression and immediately moved far away from the white tiger. The white tiger slowly turned around. Its eyes locked onto the 3 Saint rulers who were casting Saint-tier battle skills. Once locked on, it was impossible to dodge or avoid the Saint-tier battle skill. The white tiger could only face it head-on. Chapter 1049, Fight for the Divine Hall. 4. The 3 Saint rulers who were casting the Saint-tier battle skills all originated from ancient clans and belonged to the 9th heavenly layer. Their Saint-tier battle skills were equivalent to attacks from Saint Kings with their current strengths. The other Saint rules had kept the white tiger busy earlier, which provided the 3 Saint rulers with enough time to charge up their battle skills. They had completed the charge-up now, and the devastating power was about to erupt. A tremendous pressure that originated from the surroundings seemed to flood the entire hall, which caused everyone gathered in there to shiver. They all looked toward the 3 Saint rulers with obvious fear and dread. The white tiger revealed a stern gaze once again. With its body as a beast god, it indeed had the power to look down on all the Saint rulers, but the battle skills it currently faced was on the level of Saint Kings. That was enough to threaten it. It was already too late to stop the 3 Saint rulers from casting the Saint-tier battle skills. The white tiger quickly began to swipe the space before it with its front paws. With every swipe, a tiny ripple would appear. Saint-tier battle skill. Heaven-cleaving sword. Saint-tier battle skill. Swing beyond samsara. Saint-tier battle skill. Divine fist of the 6th paths. With 3 bellows, the Saint rulers simultaneously cast their battle skills after their long charge-up. The first person lifted his sword over his head and swung out in the air. They produced a blinding sword chi that shot toward the white tiger with an unstoppable force. The curved blade in the second person's hand followed an extremely profound trajectory. A vague ripple immediately appeared, and it quickly spread toward the white tiger. Wherever it passed, space would shake violently and become blurry. Although it did not really seem like anything, it possessed terrifying might. A layer of extremely dense energy coated the third person's fist. The fist seemed to move slowly, but it was flung out with exceedingly great speed. His entire right hand disappeared, as he punched out. It was like it had completely fused with the surrounding space and entered another dimension. However, in the next moment, 6 huge fists, completely condensed from energy, appeared above the white tiger's head. They all spun and revolved in a circle with one another, as each fist radiated with a terrifying aura. The paws of the white tiger swiped faster and faster. Slowly, it drew an extremely complicated image in the air. It was blurry, but it radiated with a profound aura. Each line and image seemed to contain the laws of the world. This was a defensive technique that originated from the white tiger's inherited memories. This was its first time it had used it. As soon as the formation appeared, it expanded before the white tiger. Boom! The heaven-cleaving sword struck the formation viciously and caused it to violently shake. The formation began to flicker, and terrifying energy ripples rammed into the surrounding walls, producing pattering sounds. The sword chi became locked in a stalemate with the formation in mid-air. The energy of both the formation and the sword chi quickly began to leak away, but it failed to break through the formation before completely dispersing. The defensive formation also darkened after it blocked the battle skill equivalent to a Saint King's attack. Then, its lines and images began to blur. Some lines had even been severed. When the giant sword chi vanished, a wave of faint spatial ripples collided viciously against the formation of the white tiger as well. At the same time, one of the 6 revolving fists fell from above the white tiger, as it directly targeted the white tiger's head. Roar! The white tiger shook its head and directly tossed the scepter in its mouth in Yu Yu's direction. Afterward, it produced an earth-shaking roar at the sky. A visible sound wave emerged from its mouth and spread upward to meet with the 6 fists. The defensive formation in front of the white tiger was no longer as powerful as before. After the second Saint Tier battle skill struck it, it only lasted for a short while before shattering lowly. The odd ripples surged toward the huge white tiger like a wave of water, passing through the white tiger's body. The white tiger trembled slightly and a faint, bloody mark had already appeared below its neck. Bright blood immediately began to pour from its body, dyeing its white fur red. Terrifying energy ripples began to spread from above, as the white tiger's roar destroyed the first fist of the 6. However, the second and third fist began to fall closely after one another soon afterward. They separately targeted the white tiger's head and back. Both of them moved extremely quickly. The wings on the tiger's back rose up high, as they blocked the fist that targeted its back. Its front paws clawed in a flurry, as it forcefully received the punch that targeted its head. With a boom, the 2 punches smashed the white tiger to the ground. The attack had injured its wings, as the snow-white feathers became red. Even its front paws became bloody. Even as the winged tiger god with extremely great battle prowess, the white tiger struggled to remain unscathed when it faced 3 Saint Tier battle skills at the same time. After all, it had not reached the peak of Class 7 yet. Looking at the scepter that flew over, a gleam of light flashed through Xia Wang's eyes. He had always remained by Yu Yu's side, as he protected her. He immediately leaped up to catch the scepter, before returning to Yu Yu's side. He first examined it curiously, before extending his hand to give it to Yu Yu without any hesitation. Currently, Yu Yu had focused all her attention on the white tiger. She did not even glance at the scepter that had attracted countless people. She began to worry even more after she saw that the saint rulers had injured the white tiger injured. She called out anxiously, "Xiao Bai is injured. Artifact spirit, quickly go save Xiao Bai. Don't worry, mistress. The winged tiger god won't be in much danger. It has experienced far too little battles as it grew up as well, so this is a rare opportunity for it." The artifact spirit's voice appeared in Yu Yu's head. "Someone has taken the scepter." A person cried out. Everyone immediately moved their attention from the white tiger to Xia Wang, who now held the scepter. They no longer bothered to watch the fascinating battle going on with the white tiger anymore. Instead, they all charged at Xia Wang. Xia Wang's expression drastically changed. Although he was a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler, he was nowhere near as strong as the winged tiger god. How could he handle so many opponents, especially when there were quite a few people who were also at the 9th heavenly layer like him? The last 3 giant fists also switched their targets. They no longer attacked the white tiger, now smashing threateningly towards Xia Wang's group. "Grab the scepter and enter the artifact space." Xia Wang called out in a panic. Yu Yu also understood the situation now. She immediately took the scepter from Xia Wang's hands and wanted to hide in the artifact space. However, she waited for quite a long time, but she remained where she was. Kara Liwei, who was beside her, had instead disappeared. She had already entered the artifact space. "Oh no, mistress. If you're holding that scepter, you can't enter the space." "The scepter is resisting," the artifact spirit said sternly in Yu Yu's head. But at this moment, the three remaining fists had already approached Yu Yu and Xia Wang. One of them smashed toward Xia Wang, while the other two completely locked onto Yu Yu, who held the scepter. Chapter 1050, Fairy Hao Yu's Sudden Appearance. 1. As the fists from the Saint Tier battle skills switched targets, the pressure from the surroundings also collapsed viciously on Xia Wang and Yu Yu's bodies. Xia Wang became extremely stern. It was a Saint Tier battle skill after all, and every fist would be at the level of Saint King's. It would be extremely difficult for him to block them with his strength at the 9th heavenly layer. Arg! Xia Wang roared at the sky. Churning blue light wildly flooded out of his body, before condensing on his finger and shooting toward the fists. A thumb-sized force shot through space as it radiated with blue light, shooting toward the fists with an aura of destruction. This was a powerful attack that Xia Wang had comprehended from the cultivation method of the Octaterra Emperor. Although it was not on the level of Saint Tier battle skills, it was as powerful as a pseudo-Saint Tier battle skill. Locked on by two fists, the pressure Yu Yu experienced was even greater. She could not withstand it at all with her strength that was below Earth Saint Master, so she immediately paled. Traces of blood began to pour from her mouth. Before the attack had even struck her, just the mere pressure was terrifying enough to injure her. With a loud boom, Xia Wang's attack landed on the fist that flew toward him. The attack was not on the level of Saint Tier battle skills, so it dispersed as soon as they came in contact. The fist continued on toward Xia Wang without any reduction in speed, though its force had decreased by quite a bit. Bang! The weakened fist viciously struck Xia Wang's body. He was thrown back like a sandbag as blood sprayed wildly from his mouth. A dazzling golden light appeared above Yu Yu's head. The saint artifact that always floated above her suddenly expanded, becoming a 30-meter-tall golden tower, which blocked the area in front of her in a short moment. It helped Yu Yu resist the attacks. Boom! Boom! Both of the fists landed on the saint artifact with two violent booms. They did not even shake the saint artifact. Its toughness was not something that could be overcome by Saint Tier battle skills. Even though Yu Yu was protected by the Saint Tier battle skill, it was not enough to put a stop to everyone's desire for the scepter. Several dozen saint rulers had already begun to threateningly charge toward her from all directions. On any other day, they probably would not dare to harm Yu Yu due to their fear of Jianchen, but before the great enticement present, many of them had already forgotten about living and dying. Mistress, quickly throw the scepter away and enter the artifact space. That's the only way I can ensure that you stay completely safe, the artifact spirit's voice rang through Yu Yu's head. Although the artifact spirit was a saint emperor in the artifact space, it was innately restricted, so its abilities were greatly limited. The power it could use outside was extremely weak, so protecting her outside from enemies coming in all directions was extremely difficult. Yu Yu looked at the scepter hesitantly as a sliver of unwillingness appeared in her eyes. She did not covet the scepter, it was just that the way to save Jianchen might lie with the scepter. Mistress, give up on the scepter first and enter the artifact space. Don't worry about the divine hall. Rui Jin still has his most powerful card up his sleeve, the artifact spirit called out anxiously. With that, Yu Yu finally made up her mind. She grit her teeth and began swinging her hand. She was about to throw away the scepter. If you throw away the moon god scepter, you will never be able to save the person you want to save. Consider it. At this moment, a woman's pleasant voice rang through Yu Yu's head. The sudden appearance of the voice surprised Yu Yu, which caused her to immediately tighten her grasp on the scepter. She clutched it tightly and looked around in surprise, as if she wanting to find who the speaker was. You have not thrown away the moon god scepter. You have made a choice. Don't worry, you'll be fine. The same voice rang in Yu Yu's head. It was extremely obscure, and only Yu Yu could hear it. However, she could not tell where it came from. Suddenly, the scepter in Yu Yu's hand exploded with bright light. An extremely terrifying energy erupted from the scepter, sweeping into the surroundings in the form of a storm. It flung all the saint rulers that charged toward her afar. Even the saint artifact floating above her head was unable to avoid it. It too was knocked far away by the powerful force. The energy from the scepter did not distinguish between enemies and friends. Other than Yu Yu, everyone, including the white tiger, Xiaofan, and the saint artifact, were flung far away. In the blink of an eye, everyone had disappeared within a radius of several hundred meters from Yu Yu. She seemed like the only one present as bright moonlight surrounded her. Yu Yu watched everything unfold in a dumbstruck fashion. She just struggled to believe that such a powerful energy had erupted from the very peaceful scepter. It filled her with disbelief. Before she could return to her senses, she suddenly felt her body tighten up. She had been surrounded by a mysterious force and brought into the air. She quickly flew toward the throne at the very back of the hall. Quick, stop her. Once she obtains the divine hall, we will have no more chances left, a saint ruler cried out in a panic after being knocked far away. Afterward, he immediately climbed up, shooting after Yu Yu as fast as he could. He wanted to stop Yu Yu from approaching the throne. All the other saint rulers paid no heed to their injured either. All of them wanted to take the divine hall for themselves, so none of them wanted to allow Yu Yu to take what they drooled over. They all took part in encircling and stopping Yu Yu. A terrifying ripple of residual energy spread out and all the saint rulers struck out as hard as they could. Various powerful attacks flew in from all directions, all targeting Yu Yu. Yu Yu had been completely coated in dense moonlight by the scepter. When the saint rulers' attacks landed on that layer of light, they all collapsed by themselves, unable to harm Yu Yu since she was surrounded by moonlight. Under the protection of the moonlight, Yu Yu arrived near the throne without any obstruction despite being targeted by so many densely packed attacks. Afterward, she just landed on top of it with the scepter in hand. As soon as she sat down, the space surrounding the throne began to violently twist. Everything blurred, obscuring everyone's vision. When it returned back to normal, Yu Yu had already disappeared from the throne. Chapter 1051, Fairy Hao Yu's Sudden Appearance, 2, Where is she? How'd she vanish? Everyone exclaimed in surprise when they saw the empty throne. They all became momentarily stunned. Suddenly, one of the saint rulers who had cast a saint-tier battle skill earlier seemed to think of something. A gleam of light flashed across his eyes, and he immediately flew to the throne. A white blur flashed past as soon as he approached the throne. The bloodied, white tiger had suddenly appeared before him. It opened its mouth and spat out a fist-sized ball of energy. Bang! With a muffled sound, the ball of energy exploded on the person's chest. The ball turned his chest into a bloody mess, causing him to immediately fly back as he vomited blood. Many of the people present saw what the saint ruler tried to do. With a slight thought, quite a few of them saw through his intentions. They all began to leap toward the throne without any hesitation in attempt to sit on it. Roar! The white tiger produced a roar to the sky, guarding the throne from everyone who tried to approach it. Although it was heavily injured, its might did not decrease at all. Vaguely, its presence even seemed more powerful than before. However, there were just too many saint rulers who charged at the throne. There were even quite a few heaven saint masters between them who wanted to try their luck, so it was impossible for the white tiger to block everyone just by itself. 3 saint rulers had already made their way past the white tiger and arrived before the throne, elbowing their way onto the throne all at the same time. The throne levitated 10 meters in the sky as it shined with a faint layer of moonlight force. It was much greater than the dragon thrones used by emperors. It seemed like a bed. It was large enough for 4 or 5 people to sit on at the same time. As the 3 saint rulers sat on the throne at the same time, joy immediately burst forth inside them. However, before they could celebrate, their expressions suddenly changed. In that short moment, all of their auras vanished, and they became extremely pale and haggard. Afterward, they fell off the throne, landing heavily on the ground. They probably could not get up anymore. Many people witnessed what happened to the 3 of them. The saint rulers who were just about to plunk their bottoms on the throne immediately halted as they stared at the 3 unmoving people on the ground in surprise. "Oh no, the throne is weird. You can't sit on it. The saint force in all 3 of them has been completely sucked away by the throne," a saint ruler said in fear. Immediately, everyone around the throne stopped moving. They stopped in the surroundings as they gazed at the throne in shock and suspicion. No one dared to sit down on the throne now. In the blink of an eye, the hall fell silent from the very intense battles from before. The bloody white tiger also stopped attacking, staring fixedly at the throne. The saint artifact returned to its size of a fist and flew over. It stopped above the white tiger's head and slowly rotated. Now that Yu had vanished from the hall, the saint artifact's target to protect switched to the white tiger. "All of you go. Leave the bright moon divine hall." At this moment, an obscure voice sounded through the hall. With it, a white-clothed woman suddenly appeared on the empty throne. She was illusory and not tangible, though her beauty was on par with a goddess. Why, you're Fairy Hao Yu." All the people changed in expression when they saw the illusory woman. Disbelief flooded their faces. The woman seemed exactly the same as the sculpture they had seen earlier in the divine hall. Fairy Hao Yu sat on the throne in a leisurely manner. Her expression was cold, like an iceberg that would not melt even after several millennia. It made people feel like she was unapproachable, and she seemed to look down on everyone within the hall. Her cold eyes only stopped on the white tiger for a split second. "Fairy Hao Yu, why, you're actually still alive. Fairy Hao Yu's actually still alive," all the saint rulers in the hall began to murmur. They became extremely emotional. Fairy Hao Yu was a supreme expert several tens of thousand years ago. She was known as the strongest saint emperor, and the strength she possessed was at a terrifying level. Yet now, she, who was supposed to be dead, was actually still alive. It was a stirring and unexpected piece of news. Many saint rulers had already dropped to their knees within the hall. They bowed courteously to the woman. Some of them even cried out that they wanted to take her to take them in as disciples. Fairy Hao Yu furrowed her brows as a sliver of impatience appeared on her face. She coldly said, "All of you get out. From now on, the divine hall forbids the entry of all people." Fairy Hao Yu waved her hand and a ball of powerful moonlight force began to radiate from the throne. It sent everyone there to the first floor. In the blink of an eye, the top floor of the divine hall became empty. Everyone was gone, and soon afterwards, Fairy Hao Yu disappeared from the throne as well. Yu stood in confusion as she curiously looked around the completely sealed room. She mumbled, "Weird. How did I get here, and what is this place? Your name is Yu." Suddenly, a cold voice rang out from behind her. Yu jumped in fright since she was unprepared. Yu immediately turned around and saw an ethereal beauty seated on a piece of jade, staring back at her. Yu immediately became surprised when she saw the woman's appearance, because she was exactly the same as the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu. "Why, you're Fairy Hao Yu." Yu stared at Fairy Hao Yu in surprise as she uncontrollably cried out. "Correct. I am Fairy Hao Yu." She was extremely nonchalant. She flicked her hand at the air gently and the space began to ripple violently. It changed rapidly as the formation space where all the Saint Kings were trapped gradually appeared. This was only an image within the formation space. It was taken by Fairy Hao Yu through an ability. Jian Chen. Yu Yu immediately cried out involuntarily the instant she saw Jian Chen. Worry filled her face. So the person you care so much about is called Jian Chen. May I ask who he is to you? Fairy Hao Yu stared calmly at Yu Yu. Jian Chen is my fiancé. Fairy Hao Yu, I beg of you to let Jian Chen go, Yu Yu pleaded as she looked at Jian Chen. She had originally come to gain control of the Divine Hall so she could save Jian Chen, but her intentions had vanished accordingly now that she had found out Fairy Hao Yu was still alive. Yu Yu had no interest in the Divine Hall. Her greatest wish right now was to save Jian Chen. Jian Chen's actually your fiancé, Fairy Yu Yu murmured softly as light flickered through her eyes. After a period of silent thought, she said to Yu Yu, Yu Yu, if you want to save your fiancé, there is only one way. That is to take me as your master. Are you willing? Chapter 1052, Yu Yu takes a master. Yu Yu became completely stunned when she heard that. She stared at Fairy Hao Yu blankly as disbelief flooded her face. Yu Yu had heard about the legends of Fairy Hao Yu from other people long ago. Fairy Hao Yu was a prodigy, an unprecedented genius at cultivation. It took her just a little more than 2,000 years to reach the peak of Saint Emperor, coming only an inch away from surpassing that. Even in ancient times, there was no one who could compare to her cultivation speed. After reaching the peak of Saint Emperor, she had even flown to the distant moon all by herself. She set foot on the unfamiliar territory that people rarely ever went to, collecting valuable resources to build her divine hall. Her abilities were so great and her powers were so outstanding that even among all the Saint Emperors, there was rarely anyone who could match up to her. Currently, the great Fairy Hao Yu actually wanted to take her as a disciple. Great joy flooded her entire spirit in that instance, making it difficult for her to return to her senses in a short amount of time. Taking a Saint Emperor as a master was a glorious matter, something worthy of being proud. Even with the entire continent in perspective, this was something that many people would not even consider. Yu Yu had never thought that she, someone who was far from being a prodigy, would actually be asked to become a disciple of a Saint Emperor. Fairy Hao Yu remained calm throughout. She showed no emotions as she asked once more, Yu Yu, are you willing to take me as your master? Yu Yu finally calmed down. She forcefully suppressed her churning emotions and asked calmly, Fairy Hao Yu, I understand myself that my talent is nowhere near a prodigy's level, so may I ask why Fairy Hao Yu has chosen me to become your disciple? Won't my future accomplishments sully your name? You are correct. Your talent is at most 1 in 10,000, nowhere close to a genius talent. However, do you know how wondrous the method I cultivate is? It was the cultivation method that my great father, the moon god, used several tens of thousand years of effort to create specifically for me. It takes from the fortunes of nature. It's so wondrous that even if it's cultivated by people with ordinary talent, they will have quite the future. Also, there's the divine hall that I worked so hard to create all those years ago. I've sealed moon essence into it. I only need to use a portion of it to modify your body using a secret technique and have you undergo a rebirth, so that your body becomes set for cultivation, Fairy Hao Yu guaranteed. What? Your cultivation method was created by your father after several tens of thousand years? I've only heard that Saint Emperors have a lifespan of 10,000 years. Is your father a supreme expert who surpassed Saint Emperor? Yu Yu stared at Fairy Hao Yu in surprise. A sliver of disdain flashed through Fairy Hao Yu's eyes when she heard about surpassing a Saint Emperor. She said, the origin realm's nothing. If the origin energy in this world wasn't sealed on the distant edge of outer space, I would have reached the origin realm long ago. As for my father, you will understand after you become my disciple. Yu Yu immediately dropped to her knees and said, I am indebted to Fairy Hao Yu's kindness. I, Yu Yu, am willing to become your disciple. Disciple greets master. Yu Yu bowed her head 9 times to Fairy Hao Yu. Fairy Haoyu finally showed a slight smile on her illusory face. She said, "My obedient disciple, get up quickly. You are my first disciple." With that, an invisible force lifted Yu up. Afterward, Fairy Haoyu continued, "The moon god scepter in your hands was a scepter I made after collecting materials according to the design of my father's scepter. Now, your master no longer needs it. I've sealed a portion of moonlight force into the scepter, so carry it with you in the future. It can protect you." Yu examined the scepter. It was made out of some unknown crystal and was as light as a feather. She could not feel any weight at all. The entire scepter was clouded by a faint layer of moonlight force, shining with a hazy glow. Vaguely, she could see a simple pattern on the scepter. "Master, disciple has some questions. Could everyone who obtained the scepter arrive here and be taken as a disciple of Master?" Yu asked. Fairy Haoyu proudly smiled and said, "There's no one in the world who has the right to become my disciple, and I had no intentions of taking one before. When the divine hall suddenly appeared, I had my own intentions. The scepter is useless to those who would have gotten a hold of it. They can't take it out of the hall anyway, but I changed my mind later on due to some reasons, which is why I made an exception to take you as my disciple." "Because of Jian Chen?" Yu probed. She recognized the reason why Fairy Haoyu had taken her in as a disciple long ago. It was because of Jian Chen. "Alright, don't ask anymore, my dear disciple. All you need to understand is that Master has no ill intentions toward you. Master's original disciple and only exists in the form of a soul now. This is why Master will be extremely limited in her abilities to assist you when you come across dangers in the future. However, once you cultivate my method, I will give you control of the Divine Hall. The Divine Hall is something I was proud of when I made it all those years ago, so it's extraordinarily tough. There's also layers upon layers of formations in the Divine Hall, so as long as you have it protecting you, even experts in the Origin realm will be kept busy for a while. The name of the cultivation method is the Mirror of the Moon God. If it is practiced with a special constitution, the rate will be greatly increased. Allow Master to assist you in rebirthing with the moon essence sealed within the Divine Hall. I'll pass the cultivation method on to you after that. Then you can control the Divine Hall and save the person you want to save." Although Fairy Yu was in the form of a soul, she still possessed supreme control over the Divine Hall. With a single thought, extremely dense moon essence gathered from the surroundings, slowly approaching Yu in the form of the light of a rainbow. Afterward, all of it entered her body, improving her talent by modifying her constitution. As she watched Yu be coated by the thick layer of moon essence, Fairy Haoyu suddenly seemed to fall into a trance. She thought, "Father, your daughter's not dead. Very soon, I'll be able to return to your side, and then I will tell you about Nan Potion's scheme. Nan Potion has wild ambitions. He wants to take your position as the leader of the Moon God Hall. Now that so many years have passed, I wonder if you're fine." Has the Moon God Hall fallen into Nan Potion's hands? As she thought, her illusory face suddenly became filled with deep worry. At the same moment, the huge formation still took up the same amount space on the first floor of the Divine Hall just like before, filling up a large portion of the hall where the sculpture was. A large group of people regretfully stood in the region close to where the formation lay. A few of them were even dejected, as if their souls had disappeared. These people had all been sent down from the top floor by the Divine Hall's power. Now, all of them understood that the Divine Hall was most likely taken by Yu, who had disappeared from the throne with the scepter in her hand, which was why all of them were filled with deep regret and dejection. Xiaofan and the White Tiger stood together. The fist-sized saint artifact floated over the White Tiger's head as it slowly spun. Currently, both of them were covered in blood, in horrible shape. Their injuries were quite deep. I never thought that Fairy Haoyu would still be alive. Yu's definitely been taken away by Fairy Haoyu. She should be fine, right? Though what happens next isn't something we can control or interfere with, Xiaofan said gruffly. He was rather helpless. The white tiger remained as awe-inspiring as before, standing with its head up high. It stared fixedly at the formation space up ahead as worry filled its eyes. No one knew if Jian Chen could make it out of the formation space now that Yu Yu's situation was unknown. Chapter 1053, New Master of the Divine Hall, 1, Sigh, I never thought that we'd expend so much energy while fighting over the scepter only for it to fall into the hands of a girl who's not even an Earth Saint Master. This is a huge joke. Among the crowd, a bloodied, pale-faced old man made a self-depreciating statement. He was filled with heavy dejection, and vaguely, there seemed to be slivers of envy. He was envious of Yu Yu. There's no point in continuing to stay in this divine hall. Whatever. If we have to watch that girl come out beaming with smiles while we're filled with regret, we might as well leave now, just in case we feel even more miserable when that moment comes. The old man stared at the ceiling of the divine hall in a daze as he mumbled to himself. He turned around and left as he did all that, leaving the divine hall in dejection. Isn't this all because of the winged tiger god? If it weren't for the winged tiger god getting in our way, the scepter would have entered our hands long ago. How could it be taken by a weak girl? You still don't understand? The winged tiger god tried extremely hard to stop us for the lady to obtain the scepter. Sigh, too bad she's Jian Chen's fiancée. With Jian Chen as her great supporter, even the extremely prideful winged tiger god ended up helping her out. Sigh, my daughter's roughly the same as that girl. She's also an alluring beauty, a woman of rare appearance. If my daughter could foster a relationship with Jian Chen, how good would that be? A hubbub of discussion resonated in the surroundings. Many people regretfully sighed. They were unwilling to accept this outcome, because they had come across no other treasures other than the scepter on their journey within the divine hall. They had worked hard for so long, yet in the end, they had obtained nothing. How could the people be satisfied with nothing? Quite a few people looked at the winged tiger god with undisguised hatred and resentment. All of them were extremely confident in themselves and filled with confidence in their strength. All of them believed that if it were not for the winged tiger god, the scepter would have been theirs long ago. Although many people in the crowd held deep hatred for the winged tiger god, none of them dared to do anything to it. All of them had gained a deep understanding of the winged tiger god's supreme battle prowess. It had only been somewhat heavily injured when it was facing against many saint rulers and 3 saint-tier battle skills. Killing it would be even more difficult. None of them knew if the winged tiger god was hiding any other abilities or secret techniques. All the people within the divine hall were sent to the same place by the power of the divine hall, so in that instance, the number of people on the first floor suddenly exploded. It became densely packed, almost filling up all the remaining space of the divine hall. The people who were still in the mazes before and had yet to reach the final floor learned about what had happened. They were filled with despair and regret. They all left the divine hall in low spirits after a short while. People constantly left the divine hall, causing the number of people to rapidly fall. In the end, only around 100 people remained, including the winged tiger god and Xiaofan. All of them stared at the formation where the Saint Kings were trapped in worry. The illusory fairy Hao Yu had already left where she sat before in the sealed room. She left the piece of jade for Yu Yu. Currently, Yu Yu lay on the piece of jade and was enveloped by a thick layer of moon essence. With her eyes closed, the dense moonlight force around her constantly seeped into her body, rapidly improving her body. Fairy Hao Yu stared at Yu Yu in mixed emotions as the moon essence enveloped her. She thought, the mirror of the moon god was specifically created by my father for me. The cultivation method is extremely profound in that it takes from nature itself. My father once told me that I was the only person who could cultivate with it. Any other person who uses it will become eternally doomed. I wonder if passing this cultivation method onto you was the right decision. Though, Father also once told me that the people who try to use this cultivation method will face the drawbacks once they break through the origin realm and attain godhood. Meanwhile, it will be extremely difficult for you to reach Saint Emperor within her life. Even with the support of heavenly resources, her limit will only be Saint King at most. If she cultivates the mirror of the moon god right now and has her body modified by the moon essence, she will be able to reach Saint Emperor in the very least. If origin energy was still present, she might even be able to reach the origin realm. She may never attain godhood from today on, but at least she can live much longer. In that case, I won't really be harming her. It had already been half a month since the Divine Hall had appeared, and it had become extremely crowded outside the Divine Hall. The air was filled with densely packed figures everywhere, ranging from heaven saint masters to saint kings. Several great elders had come from the protector clans, and even the Grand Elder of Mercenary City, Tianjian, had personally come. The ancestors of many ancient clans had come as well, resulting in the gathering of many saint kings. All of them stared at the Divine Hall with furrowed brows. The people who had just left the Divine Hall brought out the latest news with them, allowing everyone to learn that Fairy Hao Yu was still alive and that her figure remained in the Divine Hall. At the same time, they learned how an extremely weak woman had obtained the scepter and was sent to some unknown place by the throne of the Divine Hall. Chapter 1054, New Master of the Divine Hall, 2, What's happening? Why can't I feel the suction force? Has it stopped working on me after it's realized that it can't suck away my chaotic force? Or has something else happened in the Divine Hall? Jian Chen thought. So many days have already passed. I wonder how Yu and the others are right now. Have they successfully gained control over the Divine Hall? At the same time, a woman in blue robes currently sat within a sealed room as she cultivated 1,000 meters below the surface of the earth at the Huanggu clan. She was extremely pretty, possessing beauty that could outshine the moon and few could rival. She could enchant countless men. A faint layer of water-blue light shone in the woman's surroundings as extremely pure, water-attributed saint force pulsed from her body. It caused the air in the room to become moist, while droplets of water hung from the surrounding walls. The woman was Huang Luan, currently trapped here by the ancestor of the Huanggu clan and forced to cultivate the scripture of the aquatic sunflower. She had already been trapped here for many years. During that time, she had always been imprisoned in that room, never to be able to leave it. She was completely cut off from the world, only able to cultivate and then cultivate some more. She possessed the water spirit's body, while the scripture of the aquatic sunflower was a high-tiered cultivation method extremely suitable for people with saint force of the water attribute. As a result, the rate at which her strength increased could be described as extremely great during the years where she worked hard in the method, reaching the 6th cycle of Heaven Saint Master, now only an inch away from Saint Ruler. Although her speed was far from Jian Chen or Tai Ta's, it was equivalent to a prodigy that would only appear once every 10,000 years on the Tianyuan continent. After several years, Huang Luan's temperament had undergone a great change from before as well. The most evident part was that her pride and arrogance from before were now gone. She was becoming stronger-willed, even more mature, and silent. Suddenly, the water-blue light around Huang Luan vanished. She slowly opened her eyes and within them hid a sliver of deep hatred. The scripture of the aquatic sunflower really is wondrous. After these years of cultivating with it, most of the poison left behind by that old bastard has been purged. There's only a small residue left, which can't affect me. If I continue to work hard on cultivation, I'll immediately break through that old bastard's barrier once I reach Saint Ruler. I'll charge out and fight him to death. Afterward, the clan should hear about the news very soon, so they'll definitely come help save great-grandfather. Huang Luan calculated inside as determination flooded her face. After being trapped for so many years, she had seen through and understood a lot of things. She knew that the Huanggu clan wanted something from her since they were holding Huang Tianba as hostage, imprisoning her there and forcing her to cultivate. As a result, she had already made up her mind about the fact that she would die. The only reason why she focused on cultivation now was so that she could burst out of the room and spread the news, so that her great-grandfather could be saved. Suddenly, a muffled rumble rang out. The door slowly opened and a simply dressed old man slowly walked in. He was the ancestor of the Huanggu clan. "My dear Luaner, why haven't you been cultivating? You must work hard on cultivation and reach Saint Ruler as soon as possible. Once you reach Saint Ruler, I'll let your great-grandfather go," the ancestor smiled at Huang Luan. However, it seemed rather sinister in the dimly lit room. "How is my great-grandfather right now?" Huang Luan suppressed her intense hatred inside and asked in a composed fashion. She was not an opponent of the ancestor right now. "Don't worry. Your great-grandfather is fantastic right now. I haven't mistreated him one bit at all," the Huanggu clan ancestor smiled as he observed Huang Luan. He sighed inside. The water spirit's body sure can cultivate at an unbelievable speed once it finds a suitable cultivation method. I never thought that this girl would reach 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master so soon. The ancestor slowly made his way to Huang Luan's side. He bit his index finger and squeezed out a droplet of blood. It hung in the air, and then he used it to draw an image with his index finger. "What are you trying to do?" Huang Luan's face changed slightly when she saw what the old man was doing. She felt an ill omen, and immediately began to back off cautiously. A while later, a complicated and indecipherable inscription was drawn by the ancestor of the Huanggu clan. It glowed with a demonic red light and seemed to be filled with malevolence. The old man looked at Huang Luan and sniggered, "My dear disciple, don't worry. Your master's beloved disciple after all. Master would never harm you. Come to your master's side." The old man slowly drew closer and closer to Huang Luan. The room was not big at all, so Huang Luan hit a wall very soon. Although the door was wide open, a barrier was present outside, so she could not flee at all. Even though she did not have an escape route, she did not show any fear at all. She knew that any attempt of resistance against the Huanggu clan ancestor, who had reached Saint Ruler many years ago, was futile. After some thought, she closed her eyes and began to silently accept this situation. The old man arrived before Huang Luan and sinisterly smiled. He slowly guided the inscription at the tip of his finger to the region between Huang Luan's eyebrows. As soon as the blood-red imprint came in contact with her skin, it disappeared into her head. Huang Luan suddenly began to show signs of pain, and she moaned in uncontrollable agony. She felt her head ache with extreme pain, as if her soul was being ripped apart. The old man's smile became even more sinister after the formation had successfully entered Huang Luan's head. A long while later, the pain in her head finally began to slowly recede. She stared at the old man with a rather pale face and coldly asked, "What was that before? What did you do to me?" "This is called the blood servant's imprint. I learned it recently from an ancient scripture. The blood servant's imprint won't cause you any harm. All it does is connect our fate. If I die, you die too," the ancestor slowly explained as he sighed a breath of relief inside. "Now it'll be easy. I've planted the imprint in the girl, so I'll be safe even if Jian Chen or the 10 protector clans come knocking on the door. I hope this girl can reach Saint Ruler a little after. Once she reaches Saint Ruler, the potential of the water spirit's body will be completely activated as well. At that time, if I absorb all her hidden potential and strength as a human cauldron, I'll reach Saint King immediately. I might even be able to reach Saint Emperor in the future." Chapter 1055, New Master of the Divine Hall, 3, the ancestor of the Huanggu clan left, and the heavy door slowly slammed shut. Only Huang Luan was left in the dim room. Huang Luan did not show any panic or fear even though she was now bound by the blood servant's imprint. She was extremely calm. She had already accepted her death long ago, so she did not care at all that her life was in someone else's hands. Huang Luan returned to the center of the room and sat down. She was dazed as memories filled her eyes. She mumbled, "Jian Chen, I wonder where you are. How have you been in these years? Have you ever thought about me or missed me? Jian Chen, every moment when we were together as well as every little matter that occurred between us will be deeply embedded in my head. I will never forget you. All that can be blamed is fate. I cannot be with you forever. In the future, we may never meet again. I never thought that my last time seeing you was when we separated all those years ago." Huang Luan suddenly became sorrowful. 2 clear streaks of tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks. They landed on the cold floor and splashed apart. Deep sorrow filled the room. The fallen tears were like Huang Luan's heart, completely shattered and split into countless pieces. In the blink of an eye, another half a month passed. All the saint kings from the protector clans and ancient clans, as well as the saint rulers, stood scattered in the air around the divine hall. During that half a month, no one had left. They remained where they were, while the people of the protector clans and mercenary city all tried to think of ways to save their people trapped inside. The remaining saint rulers all remained there to watch it all unfold and also to find out who the divine hall would belong to in the end. During that time, the people from the protector clans used countless methods and had attempted countless times, but it all resulted in failure. The divine hall's toughness was incomparable to other ordinary divine halls. They could not open the divine hall even when all of them tried as hard as they could, they even struggled to leave a mark on it. So many days have passed already and they still haven't come out. There's no news of you either. I wonder what the situation is like inside. If it keeps dragging out, it will be detrimental to the people trapped inside," growled a great elder from the Shenshao sect. He was extremely stern. "We've called from outside for so many days, and even attacked the divine hall, but the divine hall does not respond at all. All it does is float here and absorb moonlight force. I think Fairy Hao Yu's dead. If this continues, the people inside will definitely face life-threatening danger. This is why I would say that why don't we, the 10 clans, use our clan treasures, the emperor armaments, and smash through the entrance of the divine hall in one stroke?" A burly, middle-aged man in black robes also spoke his mind. He was a great elder from the Yangji sect. All the great elders of the protector clans changed slightly in expression when they heard about using the emperor armaments. They became hesitant. The emperor armaments of the protector clans were not any old emperor armament. They were weapons formed and strengthened from the fusion of dozens or even 100 emperor armaments through a secret technique over countless years. It combined all their power, so it possessed extremely great might. Using it would result in extremely great backlash to all of them, and they would all be injured. The Saint Kings trapped within the formation space of the Divine Hall had all lost their powers and collapsed on the ground, including He Yu and Hong Lian. Only Jian Chen was perfectly fine. Many of them were ashen as despair filled their hearts. They had lost all hope, as if they had already been prepared to be trapped there for all their lives. At this moment, the formation space suddenly began to violently shake. The surrounding landscape began to quickly change and distort, gradually blurring. The change in the formation space alerted all the powerless Saint Kings. All of them immediately struggled to sit up, staring at the space in suspicion and surprise. What's happening? Has the formation begun to change, turning into a true killing formation to slaughter all of us here? A Saint King questioned weakly. His complexion was horrible. The faces of all the other people immediately sank when they heard that. Their complexions also became horrible, but they all continued to stare fixedly at the changing landscape. Very soon, the wasteland conjured by the formation vanished. It became rather dark for everyone, and when they could see their surroundings once more, they discovered that they had actually returned to the Divine Hall where the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu stood nearby. The formations vanished. The formations vanished. We've returned to where we were before, the formation must have run out of energy and dispersed. We're finally free. We've finally broken out of the damned formation space. Everyone became extremely emotional when they discovered that they had been freed. All of them uncontrollably cried out with joy. The Saint Kings who had already accepted their fate became even more emotional, becoming speechless. I will give you 5 seconds. Leave the Divine Hall immediately, or you won't be able to leave ever again. At this moment, a cold female's voice rang out. Fairy Hao Yu's illusionary form currently floated above the sculpture in the center of the room. Her white clothes were like snow, and she seemed otherworldly, having transcended from mortal affairs. She seemed like a goddess. It's Fairy Hao Yu. All the Saint Kings immediately cried out when they saw her. They became filled with disbelief. No, she's a soul. It's Fairy Hao Yu's soul. Her soul is actually still alive. The Saint Kings possessed great senses, much greater senses than Saint rulers. They could tell that it was Fairy Hao Yu's soul with a single glance, but even though that was the case, it still shocked them all. Saint Emperors had a life space of 10,000 years. Once that time was up, their bodies would begin to fall apart and their souls would disperse. It was impossible for them to live much longer after those 10,000 years, yet Fairy Hao Yu was someone who had lived several tens of thousand years ago, and her soul actually still remained. It was unheard of to them. 2 seconds have passed, you have 3 left, Fairy Hao Yu said as she stared coldly at the Saint Kings. All of the people no longer bothered with her matters with that. They did not doubt her abilities to trap them for all of eternity. After all, the formation just before was more than enough evidence. They immediately charged out as fast as they could, but as they had all lost their powers, they could not fly. They ran like ordinary people. Chapter 1056, Yu Yu emerges. Jian Chen revealed a sliver of hesitation as he watched all the Saint Kings hurriedly run out. He did not leave immediately, and he looked around instead. He found that the entire place was rather empty and that there was no other people present other than those who had been trapped in the formation. Esteemed Fairy Hao Yu, may I inquire about the situation for the other people who entered the Divine Hall? Jian Chen clasped his hands at Fairy Hao Yu's soul. Currently, the person he worried most for was Yu Yu. Fairy Hao Yu's gaze landed on Jian Chen and an undetectable sliver of surprise appeared in her cold eyes. However, she spoke just as coldly as before, they've all left here. Jian Chen finally felt relieved when he heard that. Without saying anything more, he left with He Yu and Hong Lian. Jian Chen gave up on the idea of taking the Divine Hall since Fairy Hao Yu was still alive. She had been reduced to only a soul now, but Jian Chen dared not underestimate her. Jian Chen, He Yu, and Hong Lian left with Carolot and Kazda Jianxiong. The great elder from the Changyang clan had left long ago. With everyone's departure, the Divine Hall recovered its peace from before. Only Fairy Hao Yu's soul remained above the sculpture in the slightly dim room. I really do want to know where they got their armor and weapon with origin energy, but if I ask them now, it's unlikely that they will tell me. They might even weave some lies to trick me. Seeing how their relationship with Jian Chen is decent, I definitely will come in contact with them quite often in the future. At that time, I can just ask my dear disciple, Yu Yu, about the origin energy. It'll definitely be much easier. So many years have passed anyway. I wouldn't mind waiting a few more days at all. Jian Chen definitely cultivates chaotic force. He walks a cultivation path that is out of the ordinary. He will not need origin energy to increase his strength at all, so I really do hope he reaches the origin realm quickly. That way, I can return home through him. I hope nothing happens to the Moon God Hall. Father, you have to wait until your daughter returns and then ruins Nan Potion's scheme. Outside the Divine Hall, the great elders from the Protector clans continued to waver over to use the Emperor armaments or not. The door of the Divine Hall suddenly swung open at that moment, and the Saint Kings that had been trapped in the formation stood at the doorway. All of them excitedly looked at the outside world, as if they had just survived a disaster. They've come out. The people from the Protector clans and a few ancient clans all became excited as well. They all flew toward the Divine Hall, taking back the Saint Kings who had lost their powers. Ruijin, Xiaofan, and the winged tiger god also arrived before the main entrance. When they saw how He Yu and Hong Lian had both lost all their power, Ruijin's face immediately changed. I never thought that your strengths would fall to such a level. Looks like the danger of the Divine Hall far exceeded anything I expected. You two better return to the artifact space first and recover. Afterward, He Yu and Hong Lian both entered the artifact space to recover their depleted energy. Brother Jianchen, my energy is depleted, so it's just too inconvenient for me to return. I was wondering if I could spend a few days in the artifact space to recover, Carolot said to Jianchen. Of course. Jianchen agreed without any hesitation. He knew quite well that the Kara clan had many enemies. It would be difficult to even run away if Carolot faced them in his current situation. Kazda Jianxiong also requested out of his own accord to enter the artifact space to recover his strength after Carolot had been taken away. In the end, he was sent into the artifact space as well. Kazda Jianxiong was the same as Carolot. They had both lost their powers and dared not to return hastily. Changyang Zhu Yunxiao supported the Great Elder who had entered with them and arrived before Jianchen. He asked for Jianchen's well-being out of concern before hurriedly leaving with the Great Elder. A few other saint rulers from the ancient clans all went up to support their ancestors, leaving the Divine Hall as well. A portion of them immediately began to return to their clans, while others stayed behind. They wanted to see who the Divine Hall would belong to in the end. Among the 10 Protector clans, the Yuan sect, the Changyang clan, and the Pure Heart Pavilion chose to leave. The 7 other Protector clans chose to stay behind, while the people from Mercenary City stayed behind as well. Many of them still cared about the Divine Hall very much. Jianchen had already dismissed all his thoughts regarding the Divine Hall. He said to Ruijin, "Is Yu fine, Senior Ruijin?" Ruijin shook his head in response, "Yu still hasn't come out." "What? Yu hasn't left the Divine Hall?" Jianchen became surprised with that and immediately began to worry. A powerful ripple of energy appeared from behind him at this moment. He immediately turned around to look when he sensed the abnormality. He found that the Divine Hall had stopped absorbing moonlight force and was rapidly shrinking, becoming the size of a fist in just a few mere seconds. It was becoming a small, white but exquisitely crafted Divine Hall. Without the obstruction of the Divine Hall, a purple-dressed, elegant woman appeared before everyone. "You are." Jianchen could not help but call out in joy when he saw the person, as it was Yu. Yu gestured with her hand, and the Divine Hall immediately flew obediently into her hand. It enveloped her entire body with hazy moonlight force, allowing her to become resistant to the unique environment of outer space. Yu saw Jianchen, and her face immediately stirred. "Jianchen, you've finally returned safely. I haven't let you down. I've successfully gained control of the Divine Hall and saved you from it." Jianchen took a single step and appeared beside her, directly traversing several hundred meters. He felt pleasantly surprised as he stared at the bright moon Divine Hall in her hand and asked in disbelief, "Yue, what did you just say? You've successfully gained control of the Divine Hall?" Yu immediately felt pleased with herself when she saw Jianchen's surprise. She nodded firmly. "Then Fairy how you?" Jianchen paused. He felt confused inside. Fairy Hao Yu was clearly still alive, so how did the Divine Hall end up in someone else's hands? Jian Chen, Fairy Hao Yu has accepted me as her disciple. She's my master now, Yu said rather proudly. She smiled sweetly as she was extremely happy. Jian Chen was stunned with that, but he soon became overjoyed as well. It was even rarer than the divine hall for Yu to become a disciple of Fairy Hao Yu. The surrounding saint rulers and saint kings heard their conversation clearly. When they learned that Yu had indeed obtained the divine hall and even become a disciple of Fairy Hao Yu, the saint rulers who had fought over the scepter were greatly affected, deepening the regret and unwillingness within them. The saint kings looked at Yu with deep envy, coupled with a sliver of extremely well and deeply hidden jealousy. However, they all knew about the relationship between Yu and Jian Chen, which is why they dared not let the thought of taking it cross their minds before Jian Chen. On the other hand, the people of the protector clans seemed very calm. Divine halls may be extremely precious to ancient clans, but they seemed common and ordinary to the ancient protector clans. Even if the amount of divine halls that were inherited from their predecessors was ignored, just the quantity that they obtained from other sources was plentiful. What truly made the protector clans drool over was Fairy Hao Yu's cultivation method. Yu's talent for cultivation also underwent an overwhelming change under the transformation of moonlight essence. She was enough to be called a great genius now. Her strength had passed through Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master, reaching Heaven Saint Master. Chapter 1057. Infant Yu roughly explained her encounter in the Divine Hall to Jian Chen, so Jian Chen gained an understanding as well. He felt happy for Yu's fortuitous encounter. Yu was only a Heaven Saint Master now, but there were extremely few people who could become Heaven Saint Masters at her age, even with the entire Tianyuan continent in perspective. Yu's cultivation talent had also undergone an overwhelming change, so her speed at cultivation greatly increased. Many of the experts from ancient and hermit clans who stayed behind went up to the two of them to congratulate them. They smiled amicably and congratulations constantly rang out. Their attempts to get on Jian Chen's good side were obvious, and even two experts from protector clans had gone up to congratulate them, wanting to pull Jian Chen to their side vaguely enough. Although the 10 protector clans were envious of the winged tiger god that followed Jian Chen and wanted to take it for themselves, Jian Chen was no longer the weakling from before. He was strong enough where even they themselves needed to be wary and powerful enough where they dared not provoke him easily. The winged tiger god following Jian Chen had already become a matter set in stone, so they obviously had no wish of lingering on Jian Chen's bad side. Jian Chen was rather mannerly. He would thank the people who came up to congratulate him politely regardless of actually being acquaintances. Yu, on the other hand, was once a princess, so she behaved in a very refined manner as well. She thanked them with a faint smile. Now that the Bright Moon Divine Hall had a master, the disruptions caused by the Divine Hall finally came to an end. All the experts gathered in outer space dispersed with mixed emotions. Tian Jian spoke a few words to Jian Chen out of courtesy before leaving immediately. Soon after that, only Jian Chen's group remained in the same place. Let's go back first, Jian Chen said to Yu, before extending his hand around Yu's thin waist. The White Tiger and Xia Wang had already entered the artifact space to heal. Yu did not stop Jian Chen. She smiled happily as she was embraced around the waist, leaning gently on Jian Chen's shoulder. The Divine Hall had already disappeared silently into her hand. Jian Chen left outer space with Yu and Rui Jin, returning to the Tianyuan continent. They directly descended to the air above Fragrance River. Although over a month had passed since the Divine Hall had appeared, its effects still lingered on all the people. Many people had stayed by the river and some people had even set up tents on the two riverbanks. They stared at the sky days on end, wanting to know who the Divine Hall ended up with in the end. Jian Chen did not tarry when he returned to the City of God. He found Quan Yukai and Yang Ling, bidding farewell after just a short conversation. He left with Yang Ling. Hong Lian and He Yu remained in the artifact space to recover their strength, so only Rui Jin accompanied them on the way back. He ripped open a space gate, going back to the Changyang clan in Lore City. Tsar Vamos stood on the roof of the Tsar family estate, staring deeply in the direction where Jian Chen had disappeared off to. A lot of the Kara clan and Kazda Jianxiong of the Kazda clan have both lost all their strength. They're extremely weak, and without the two of them, the Kara clan and Kazda clan are extremely fragile. How good of an opportunity, too bad Kaiyun. Sigh, I sure do regret the past, I sure do regret the past. Tsar Vamos was filled with regret. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu currently sat on a huge rock on the mountain of the distant Three Saint Island. They faced the vast ocean where the sea blended with the sky, quietly playing their zither. Their abilities at the zither were nowhere near the heavenly enchantress, but they possessed an extremely great achievement nonetheless. Not only were their zither tunes graceful and able to calm people, they also possessed a natural beauty. A white-robed woman sat behind the two of them. She was the young lady of the Tianqin clan, Qin Qin. She was not playing the zither. Instead, she sat on the cliff with her eyes closed, carefully listening to the music played by Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu. Her zither, modeled from the zither of the demonic cry, was placed firmly on her legs. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu finally stopped playing a long while later. They slowly put their zither away and stood up, calmly staring at Qin Qin. A while later, Xiao Yu said, "Junior Qin Qin, have you sensed the existence of the heavenly melody?" Qin Qin slowly opened her eyes and a sliver of confusion flashed through. She shook her head, "Seniors, I've heard you mention this heavenly melody many times, but just what is it? We can't explain it clearly either, because it was what our master told us back then. All we know is that it's a feeling. It's an odd feeling, a feeling of tone. Only by sensing the heavenly melody can you be considered to have grasped the basics of the way of the zither," said Xiao Yu as reminiscence appeared in her eyes. "Looks like our comprehension of the way of the zither is not enough. We don't have the power to let Junior sense the heavenly melody just by ourselves. Maybe it'll only work if Master personally plays. It's a pity that Master's been in seclusion for many years already. I wonder when she'll come out," Xiao Qian said rather regretfully. Suddenly, Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu's eyes froze. They suddenly turned their heads to look into the distance, where the sky and sea joined as one. A streak of violet light rapidly enlarged, approaching Three Saint Island at an unbelievable speed. It was still at the horizon, yet it had arrived on the island a second later. It was only 10 meters away from Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu now. Its speed was shocking. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu grew solemn. They immediately became cautious when such a great expert suddenly visited the island, but they saw who the violet figure was very soon. They stared blankly as they became extremely shocked, calling out in unison, "Master!" The violet figure was the mistress of the island, the heavenly enchantress. In violet robes, the heavenly enchantress stood honorably and coldly. She stood with her back from Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu as her black hair fell naturally from her shoulders like a fountain. "Master, it's you. Weren't you in seclusion? Why have you suddenly appeared outside?" Xiao Qian was filled with shock. She had never sensed the heavenly enchantress leave in the past few years, always believing that she remained in seclusion. "In my seclusion, I just happened to go out for a journey. I've only just returned." "Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, has anything happened on Three Saint Island during these recent years?" The heavenly enchantress ignored the question and replied icily. Her voice was emotionless. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu immediately understood the heavenly enchantress' explanation. Xiao Yu replied, "Master, all because of you, Three Saint Island has remained as peaceful as before. Nothing big has happened." Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu walked toward the heavenly enchantress happily as they spoke. Although they were disciples of the heavenly enchantress on the surface, they were actually more like sisters. When Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu arrived by her side, they discovered that she was currently carrying an infant wrapped in a cotton cloth. They immediately became astonished. Master, whose child is this? Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu said together. They immediately leaned over, curiously staring at the infant. A sliver of mixed emotions appeared in the heavenly enchantress' eyes. She lowered her head to look at the sleeping infant and said, "There was war in a small kingdom on the continent. The child was lying among mountains of corpses and pools of blood. His parents both passed away, so I took pity on him and brought him back." Chapter 1058, Xiao Bao. "Oh, Master, this child is so pitiful. He's lost his parents soon after being born. That's just too pitiful." The kind Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu immediately became deeply sympathetic when they learned about the miserable life of the infant. Their gazes toward the child also underwent changes, becoming filled with love. "Master, let's let this pitiful child live on Three Saint Island in the future." Xiao Qian touched the child's cheek with a jade-like finger as she pleaded. "Yeah, Master, let's just let the child stay with us on Three Saint Mountain. The mountain's this big and there's only the four of us. An additional person would bring an additional portion of liveliness," Xiao Yu also insisted. She liked the chubby, white infant in the heavenly enchantress' arms very much and felt even more sympathetic. The heavenly enchantress had already removed her veil, revealing her supreme beauty. She looked at the infant with mixed emotions and gently sighed, "All right then. Since you all like this child so much, let's let him live on Three Saint Island." "Yes, fantastic. There'll be one extra person on Three Saint Mountain in the future." Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu immediately cried out. They were like little girls as they behaved in such a lively manner. "Master, the child still doesn't have a name. Why not give him a name?" Xiao Yu suggested. "Oh my, let me do that then. I'm best at giving names to children." Xiao Qian excitedly took up the right to name the child. After some thought, she said, "Master, looking at how cute the child is, why not call him Xiao Bao?" "Xiao Bao, that name sounds pretty good." "It sounds quite cute," Xiao Yu said after some thought as well. The heavenly enchantress hesitated slightly before faintly nodding in the end, "All right then. This child will be called Xiao Bao in the future. Master, leave Xiao Bao to the two of us. We will be responsible for looking after him in the future." Xiao Yu giggled, before extending her hands to carry Xiao Bao. "No need." The heavenly enchantress appeared silently 10 meters away, gradually moving further away with Xiao Bao. She said, "I'll look after Xiao Bao. Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, immediately go down the mountain to find some high-quality milk. You two will be responsible for Xiao Bao's food in the future." "Yes, Master." Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu replied in unison, though they seemed to be dejected. "Qin Qin, you should rest for a few days. I will play the zither for you in 3 days so that you can comprehend the heavenly melody," the heavenly enchantress softly said, before completely disappearing. The heavenly enchantress sat dazed on a big rock within a secret room with Xiao Bao in her arms. Her expression was extremely complicated with some distress mixed in. Xiao Bao seemed to sense the heavenly enchantress' distress and began to make sounds. He stared at the heavenly enchantress with his large, pure eyes out of curiosity as he unconsciously moved his arm. The heavenly enchantress looked at Xiao Bao and secretly sighed inside. She said, "I was pregnant for 10 whole years to give birth to Xiao Bao. Meanwhile, my strength has skyrocketed at an unbelievable rate during my pregnancy, reaching the current level with the addition of the dragon's saliva. Xiao Bao, are you my blessing or curse?" From then on, one more person joined Three Saint Island. That person was a male infant, Xiao Bao. The Changyang clan in Lore City was currently in joy. Jian Chen's return immediately caused it to become bustling. In the present day, Jian Chen's status in the clan was unrivaled. He was the glory of the clan, the pride of the clan. He earned the respect of everyone. All of the elderly members of the clan immediately went up to personally receive him when he returned. Their gazes toward him were filled with deep pride and admiration. These older members were all part of the upper echelon. Although they were not powerful, mostly Earth Saint Masters, they were Jian Chen's great-grandfathers if seniority was considered. In a corner of the clan, Jian Chen's second brother, Changyang-ku, watched on with mixed emotions as everyone seemed to parade into the conference hall with Jian Chen. He was strewn between emotions and could not help but think back to every single moment he had been in contact with Jian Chen when he was young. He could still clearly remember that his youngest brother's status was nowhere near his when he was labeled as a cripple who could not use Saint Force, yet now, the cripple had become a powerful figure that could shake up the continent with a twitch of his feet. On the other hand, even after expending a large quantity of the clan's monster cores, Changyang-ku was still stuck at Great Saint Master. He had not even reached Earth Saint Master. Big brothers become a disciple of the Pure Heart Pavilion of the 10 Protector clans, while sisters become the saintess of some unknown ice god hall. Youngest brothers has become a shocking expert of the continent. He's now a Saint King. Now there's only me, Changyang-ku, without any proud achievements. I haven't even reached Earth Saint Master. Am I useless? Changyang-ku laughed at himself and became rather dejected. Of the 4 sons and daughters of the current patriarch, Changyang-ba, 3 of them had already become famed figures. There was only him who remained relatively unknown even today, which greatly affected him. Jian Chen casually conversed with the seniors of his clan, before returning to his own room. Due to Jian Chen's unique status, he also received special treatment from the clan. His luxurious, palace-like residence from before had been rebuilt once more. Not only was it larger, it was even more grand and majestic. It could rival the royal palaces of kings. Jian Chen's palace-like residence had already become the symbol of the Changyang clan. It took up an entire third of the estate. The great tower created by Changyang Zhu Yunxiao and Changyang Zhu Yeyun had been demolished long ago. Jian Chen felt rather helpless knowing the clan rebuilt his residence. He really did not have any demand for the reconstruction of his residence. He had even learned from his mother that the reconstruction was actually suggested by the ancestor of the clan, Changyang Zhu Yunkong. He had even obtained the agreement of everyone, including Changyang Zhu Yunxiao and Changyang Zhu Yeyun. On that night, Jian Chen gathered in the residence with Little Fatty, Wang Yifeng, Seniorin, Yunzheng, Ong Ling, and the others. They drank together and talked about everything, laughter echoed out constantly. Jian Chen, I've already made up my mind. Once you leave the Changyang clan, Wang Yifeng, Seniorin, Yunzheng, and I will go out to train. We'll roam the Tian Yuan continent properly. Locking ourselves up and cultivating every day is like shutting ourselves from the world. It's not very helpful at all, Little Fatty drunkenly said. His resolute face had already become bright red from drinking. Jian Chen secretly nodded to that. Although Little Fatty's talent was impressive, his age was still a thing after all. He lacked legitimate experience, so roaming the Tian Yuan continent would indeed be extremely beneficial to him. Du Gufeng's currently at Mercenary City, taking up the position as disciplinary elder. He's responsible for punishing the mercenaries that have done wrong. Ever since sister-in-law Yu Yu's left with you, the management of Flame City has all fallen to Bai Lian. She's been managing the city in an orderly manner and has also raised many members of the upper echelon for management as well. Currently, the city is growing with each coming day. Together with your name, Jian Chen, many saint rulers have already been drawn over. Your great-grandfather Bai Hai's also gone with your sister Bai Lian to the city, protecting her as he watches over her cultivation. At the table, Jian Chen gained some understanding of Flame City's situation from his dear friends. He both loved and felt pity for his sister Bai Lian. He knew it had been difficult for her over the years. She must have spent quite the effort for Flame City. Chapter 1059, Disturbance at Flame City. Deep into the night, Jian Chen's lively residence finally quietened down. Little Fatty and everyone else left, and they returned to their own residences to rest. Only Jian Chen remained, with a few female servants who were cleaning up the table. Jian Chen walked outside before he gently leaped onto the roof. He laid down and stared at the pitch-black sky. His deep eyes seemed to pierce the space, as he looked at the silver-white bright moon divine hall in the distant outer space. Yu Yu was not at the Changyang clan. Soon after she returned with him, she entered the divine hall. Then, she went to outer space to absorb the essence of the moon to cultivate. After she accepted Fairy Hao Yu as her master, Yu Yu became extremely enthusiastic toward cultivation. She worked even harder and even more arduously. She only wanted to increase her strength as much as possible, so she could do some things for Jian Chen and share his burden. Jian Chen laid on the roof and zoned out, as he stared at the night sky. He became slightly confused as he murmured, "Why did Fairy Hao Yu take Yu Yu as a disciple? Yu Yu's talent is good, but that's only with a small kingdom like Jessen in perspective. It's nothing if you look at the entire continent. There are countless prodigious females on the continent, and their talent is far greater than Yu Yu's. So, why didn't Fairy Hao Yu take someone else?" In that moment of peace, Jian Chen began to think of many things. He felt most suspicious about Fairy Hao Yu accepting Yu Yu as her disciple. "I don't think this is as simple as it seems. Fairy Hao Yu probably has some other intentions," murmured Jian Chen as he pondered. Suddenly, Jian Chen's gaze froze. He immediately stopped talking to himself, as he saw a black figure leap up to the roof. The figure produced gentle sounds as they stepped on the tiles, slowly making their way toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen did not get up, lying on the roof as before. He cushioned his head with his arms, as he continued to stare at the night sky. The black figure arrived beside him. Then, they laid down just like Jian Chen. His movements caused the tiles to creak. He said, "Brother, it's so late. Why haven't you gone to sleep?" Jian Chen turned around and looked at the figure. He smiled, "Brother, doesn't that apply to you as well? And to me, sleeping nowadays is basically wasting time." "Sai, you're right. You've already become a Saint King now. You're a peak-level expert even with the whole continent in perspective. You indeed don't need sleep to recover at your level of strength," Changyang sighed gently. A faint sorrow filled his face. "Brother, have you been well these days?" Jian Chen asked. Although Changyang had once gone against him in everything he did, that happened when they were young. Jian Chen stopped bothering about it long ago, treating it as the arguments between kids. "Sai, you, big brother and sister have all become great, famed people, either a supreme expert or a prodigy peak-level sects heavily favor. Only I remain unknown, a nobody. I'm still stuck at being a great Saint Master even until now, and I don't even know when I can reach Earth Saint Master. Do you think I've been well these years?" Changyang sighed. He was gloomy. Jian Chen remained silent. It was true that Changyang's talent was not really extraordinary. Even with the support of a great clan, he remained at Great Saint Master and improved at a rather slow rate. Changyang suddenly sat up and wishfully looked at Jian Chen. He said, "Brother, you're already a supreme figure of the continent now. I know you have extremely great abilities, so can you help me? I don't want to lie in waste anymore. I don't want to become an embarrassment to big brother, sister, and you," pleaded Changyang. It was very courageous of him to say such things. Jian Chen slowly sat up. "Brother, I still have some heavenly resources on me. When I go to Flame City tomorrow morning, I'll get the alchemist there to refine the resources into pills. It can modify your constitution. However, hard work is what truly determines your accomplishments, even though these items can improve your constitution." "Brother, thank you. I will definitely work hard on cultivation in the future," emotions began to overwhelm Changyangku. He seemed to see a sliver of light in the darkness before him and hope for the future. On the next day, Jian Chen left Yangling at the clan, before going to Flame City with Rui Jin. Flame City was even busier than before. Mercenaries flowed unendingly in and out of the city gates, along with many merchants who had come to hire them. The Flame mercenaries had experienced a huge setback and almost collapsed, but Jian Chen was just too famous. Coupled with his position as captain, the mercenaries regrouped at an astonishing rate. Not only did they recover their peak strength in less than a month, but they also became even stronger than before. There were even several saint rulers who came to join them. The Flame mercenaries had already exceeded many hermit clans in strength now. They were no weaker than ancient clans with Jian Chen in consideration, as he had killed saint kings before. They became one of the few great mercenary groups and their names shook the continent. The banners of the mercenaries had almost become a life-saving charm. Wherever the banners passed by, no one dared to behave in an offensive manner. This included bandits and the people from a few large clans. They all would give way on their one accord in a courteous fashion. As a result, all the escorting missions that people of the Flame mercenaries undertook proceeded smoothly. Blood would only be drawn when they came across a few ignorant magical beasts. More and more merchants became willing to recruit the Flame mercenaries as a result. Jian Chen levitated 1,000 meters in the air, as he stared down at the bustling city with a joyous smile. However, his eyes suddenly froze when he swept past the very center of the city, and his complexion became rather horrible. A 300-meter-tall stone statue stood there. It gazed into the distance like a ruler, lording over the world in an impressive manner. It was a sculpture of Jian Chen that was carved in a lifelike fashion. It seemed just like a real person. With a darkened complexion, Jian Chen ran through the air and arrived above the stone statue with just a few flashes. He directly struck it with his palm and the entire statue shattered with a violent boom. It drifted down in the form of dust. He had personally destroyed a statue of himself. The statue was irreplaceable in the city. This was because it depicted a legend, an epic of the continent. At the same time, it depicted a supreme saint king, who was the spiritual leader of the Flame mercenaries. It was Jian Chen. The destruction of the statue immediately raised the attention of the people nearby. All of them began to seethe as soon as they witnessed the destruction of the statue of the captain they admired and worshipped the most. Killing intent and rage immediately began to surge within them, burning like roaring flames. The statue of the captain has been destroyed. Someone has destroyed the captain's statue. Which bastard did this? I'll personally carve you up for destroying the statue of our captain. How dare they destroy the statue of our captain? I'll chop whoever did it into 1,000,000 pieces. The eyes of each and every person became bloodshot, as they gnashed their teeth. Intense rage began to burn within their eyes. The destruction of Jian Chen's statue was like the murder of their parents. It was a debt that would be seared into the blood, and a crime that could not be forgiven. How dare you, you madman! You must be sick of living for destroying the captain's statue. Pay with your life. A roar suddenly erupted from deep within the city. Several large presences surged into the sky as a few saint rulers that had joined the mercenaries shot toward the statue in rage. Chapter 1060. The first captain. The roars from the saint rulers rang through the entire city, so everyone learned that someone had destroyed the captain's sculpture. It threw everyone into a rage, to the point where even more mercenaries took to the skies and quickly flew toward the center. The main headquarters of the mercenaries was located toward the rear of the city. It was a palace constructed like an emperor's, and the core power of the mercenaries gathered there. The people in charge stayed in this palace. Currently, the green-dressed Bai Lian and several high-ranking members of the mercenaries were sternly discussing the developments of the Flame mercenaries. Suddenly, a shout passed through the various obstructions and resounded clearly in the room. disrupting Bai Lian's meeting with the others. Bai Lian's complexion immediately darkened when she heard that someone had destroyed the sculpture of her own brother. Her eyes shone with a chilling light. "Humph, I'd like to see just who it is that dares to destroy my brother's sculpture. I definitely won't let them go so easily for acting so recklessly." Bai Lian was enraged. She slammed the desk and left despite the meeting. She strode outward with a darkened face, while the high-ranking members followed closely behind her. Jian Chen floated several hundred meters in the air at the center of the city. Jian Chen crossed his arms and leisurely watched as the saint rulers quickly approached him. By his side, Rui Jin floated expressionlessly, gazing at the obliterated sculpture from time to time. Some doubt also filled his eyes. The saint rulers all possessed surging presences as they drew their saint weapons. Then, they surrounded Jian Chen and Rui Jin. Surging energy pulsed wildly around them, which caused the surrounding space to slightly twist. They were ready for battle at any time. "Who are you? Why have you destroyed Captain Jian Chen's sculpture? Why don't you quickly?" a saint ruler yelled at Jian Chen as he glared at him, but before he had finished speaking, he became surprised. He stared blankly at Jian Chen's appearance as disbelief flooded his face. The saint ruler stared blankly at him for quite a long time. Then, he asked with a trembling voice that was filled with shock, Why, you're Captain Jian Chen?" "What?" Captain Jian Chen, the 4 other saint rulers all became astounded when they heard this. They immediately observed Jian Chen carefully. They had never seen Jian Chen before, but they had seen his images and his sculptures, so they were familiar with his appearance. They immediately noticed that the young man really did seem the same as their captain. Another tremendous aura appeared, rapidly drawing closer to Jian Chen's location. It was the ancestor of the Bai family, Bai Hai, who flew over with Bai Lian at lightning speed. Both of their faces were pale as anger burned within them. The destruction of Jian Chen's sculpture seemed to have touched their most sensitive area. They were currently thinking about how they would viciously punish the person who destroyed the sculpture. But when the 2 of them saw the saint rulers that encircled Jian Chen and Rui Jin, they became stunned as stupefaction filled their faces. A bucket of cold water seemed to extinguish their roaring flames of anger, disappearing completely. "Brother, how is it you?" Bai Lian called out. She was astonished. Bai Hai also stared at Jian Chen in stupefaction. Then, he looked at the pile of dust that was once a sculpture. He was confused. He had already learned that the person who destroyed the sculpture was his own great-grandson by now. "We greet Captain Jian Chen." The saint rulers that had arrived first finally confirmed Jian Chen's identity. Without any hesitation, they bowed and respectfully greeted Jian Chen. They were all extremely excited. Jian Chen was a legendary figure of the continent, someone that could only be heard about in stories. Even as saint rulers, they struggled to stay composed. As for their anger, it had completely disappeared long ago. Jian Chen saw Bai Lian's thin face, and his anger about the sculpture vanished in that moment. Love began to fill his heart, and he made his way through the air to Bai Lian in an instant. He then looked at her lovingly and pitifully, as he gently said, "Lianer, it really must have been tiring managing the matters of the mercenaries." Bai Lian could not help but smile sweetly from Jian Chen's loving concern for her well-being. However, she then gazed past the missing sculpture in the center of the city and became confused. She asked, "Brother, did you destroy the sculpture?" "Yes, it was me who destroyed it," Jian Chen said nonchalantly as he stared at the clouds of dust in the air. "Brother, the statue was sculpted with a great deal of effort from over 100 artisans I found. Why did you destroy it? Was it badly sculpted?" Bai Lian felt like she had suffered a wrong as she spoke delicately. "Lianer, don't get mad. Brother has no intentions of blaming you. It's just that you don't understand the origins of the mercenaries. The statue standing in the center of the city should not be depicting me, but the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries, Jian Chen said softly. He gazed into the horizon as reminiscence filled his eyes. The first captain? Aren't you the first captain, brother? Bai Lian became surprised as disbelief filled her face. Jian Chen shook his head. Liener, I am not the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries. The first captain was called Kendall. I'm only the second. The matters from the past flashed through Jian Chen's head like a movie. Jian Chen thought back to the days where he wandered the magical Beast Mountain range with the members of the Flame Mercenaries. He could still remember clearly that many years ago, the Flame Mercenaries faced the pursuit of a Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King. In the end, everyone died to it except him, including the first captain, Kendall. Kendall's greatest wish was for the Flame Mercenaries to become the greatest and most powerful mercenary group on the Tianyuan continent. As a result, Jian Chen took up the great aspiration of expanding the Flame Mercenaries in order to complete Kendall's wish. Back then, when he became the second captain of the Flame Mercenaries, he was alone. Afterward, Ming Dong joined. Now, after so many years, the mercenary group had expanded from its initial, nameless state to something that could shake up the continent. Brother, who is the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries? Why haven't I heard a single thing about him after staying so long in the Flame Mercenaries? Bai Lian asked. Jian Chen sighed gently. He died many years ago. With that, Jian Chen suddenly grabbed at the ground with his two hands. The ground at the center of the city quickly began to move, and the soil surged rapidly into the air. It climbed higher and higher. In just a few seconds, Jian Chen erected a huge statue from the earth. Chapter 1061, Exploring the Tungsten Alloy Deposit. Once more all the mercenaries and merchants stared at the huge statue in shock as it had grown from the ground. Many of them became confused. The statue had completely replaced Jian Chen's sculpture, but it depicted another person. It was an honest-looking middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 40s. He was the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries, as well as the founder, Kendall. Jian Chen stared at the familiar face with mixed emotions as reminiscence filled his eyes. He would never forget how Kendall looked. He was like a scorching brand that had been deeply imprinted into the depths of Jian Chen's head. He could not forget him even if he wanted, and even though so many years had passed, he could recall it before his eyes exactly like when it happened. The statue that had grown from the ground was created by Jian Chen using his own abilities by taking control of the earth and then modifying it match the Kendall from his memories. This was not an extravagant expenditure. As long as one was a saint ruler that could control earth-attributed saint force, it could easily be achieved. However, Kendall's statue was still very fragile after its creation, and it lacked a certain charm. Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes, and with a single thought, the earth-attributed energy of the world immediately began to bubble, surging in from everywhere with extremely great speed. In the end, it turned into a hazy earthen-yellow light that flowed unceasingly into the statue. The color of the statue immediately began to change with the input of the energy. It began to whiten at a visible rate, the soft soil turning to tough stone, becoming harder and harder. Jian Chen could control all 6 attributes of energy, including light and dark. He had gathered all the earth-attributed energy in a radius of 100 kilometers, using all he had to construct Kendall's sculpture. Yu, Bai Hai, and the 5 saint rulers stared unblinkingly at the statue as it became harder and harder, observing the unfamiliar face. They all knew inside that this was probably the first captain Jian Chen spoke of. Although the statue at the center of the city which represented the glory of Flame City had completely changed, they dared not voice any objections even as high-ranking members. This was all what Jian Chen decided, and Jian Chen's status in the mercenaries was irreplaceably high. Even Bai Lian, in charge of managing the mercenaries, could not object. Jian Chen had basically become a god to every member of the mercenaries. He was the pillar of mental support for the entire group. A single casual sentence from him was like an edict from God himself. More and more people gathered around Kendall's statue, causing it to become crowded very soon. The large square became extremely packed. Most of the people were members of the Flame Mercenaries, and had come with burning rage. They wanted to brutally punish the person who destroyed Jian Chen's statue. However, they could not help but become doubtful when they saw Bai Lian and the saint rulers just floating in the air, taking no action whatsoever. They sensed that this matter did not seem as severe as they had imagined, but due to the distance and where they stood, many people could not see Jian Chen, so they failed to recognize him. After 10 whole minutes, the Earth-attributed energy finally dispersed, and Kendall's sculpture was completed. Kendall's sculpture was currently as tough as steel. Jian Chen had even left a large quantity of Earth-attributed energy within the sculpture, causing its toughness to greatly increase. Even Heaven Saint Masters would struggle to break it. Kendall's statue did not radiate with any earth-shaking aura. It seemed extremely ordinary. His honest and kind-looking face was created in a lifelike fashion by Jian Chen, as if Kendall was still alive. Jian Chen stood with his arms crossed as he gazed at the statue with deep emotions. He said, "Do you all see? He was the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries. His name is Kendall, and the statue that stands in the center of the city belongs to him, not me. If there was not Captain Kendall, the current Flame Mercenaries would not exist." Bai Lian and the others all stared at the statue with their full attention. Their expressions became mixed, and they remained speechless for quite some time as the information was just too astounding. At the same time, the news that Jian Chen's statue had been changed spread through the entire city like wildfire. It caused a huge commotion, causing people to discuss it everywhere and at all times. Jian Chen stayed there for a while, before returning to the palace in Flame City. Soon after that, the news regarding Kendall as the first captain of the Flame Mercenaries was spread out as well, traveling through the entire city with lightning speed. Everyone there learned about the truth regarding this matter, as well as the identity of the person that the statue depicted. Although many people believed it still should have been Jian Chen as a statue, they did not show any objections, let alone any dissatisfaction, since Jian Chen had personally saw it through. Jian Chen gained an even clearer understanding regarding Flame City from Bai Lian. Everything happened smoothly. It could be said that ever since Jian Chen had returned from the Sea Realm and had taken back the city from the Extinguishing Alliance, the status of the Flame Mercenaries skyrocketed on the Tianyuan continent, allowing the mercenaries to successfully develop in an extraordinary fashion. Also, Jian Chen learned from Bai Lian that the first few members of the mercenary group had completed their training in Valorant City. They had all returned to Flame City and had successfully become a part of the Flame Mercenaries with the token of identification Jian Chen had given them all those years ago. Jian Chen treated them with particular importance as they were loyal subordinates. He met with them in person. Through the years outside when they had trained on the edge of life and death, they had undergone a baptism of blood, forged an iron willpower, gained powerful battle prowess, and nurtured a spirit that did not fear death. However, during their adventures on the Tianyuan continent, there were members who were lost, as well as some loyal, bold mercenaries that joined. Under the fluctuating number, there were 65 of them now. Each and every one of them had reached Earth Saint Master, and they all possessed battle skills. Their strength was incomparable to ordinary people. On the other hand, the Golden Fur Tiger King Cub they had obtained in Valorant City had fallen in an intense battle before it had fully matured. Although no one reached Heaven Saint Master out of all of them, a few slightly talented members had reached the 6th cycle of Earth Saint Master. They were only an inch away from Heaven Saint Master and had grasped Heaven Tier battle skills. Jian Chen had decided many years ago that he would use everything he had to nurture this group of people. As a result, he took them all into the artifact space, providing them with a quiet environment and all the resources required for cultivation, so that they would cultivate diligently to increase their strength. He even used invaluable heavenly resources of high maturity to change their constitutions. Jian Chen, even with the increase from the heavenly resources in their talent, they can only reach Saint Ruler at most due to innate restrictions. Some of them will even struggle to reach Saint Ruler. Is it really worth it to expend so much effort and resources in raising them? Rui Jin found Jian Chen's actions rather wasteful. Currently, the flame mercenaries are completely under my control. There were a few Saint Rulers who joined us, but they're completely untrustworthy. If the flame mercenaries wants to become truly powerful and maintain a steady, unmovable position on the Tianyuan continent, it needs to possess its own powerful force. They will be that force in the future, said Jian Chen. His decision in raising all of them was not wavered at all. There is no need to worry about their talent. There may be limits in what 1,000-year heavenly resources can change, but 10,000-year heavenly resources will definitely be able to change them completely. I may not be able to pull out that many heavenly resources at such a maturity right now, but looking for them would not be difficult with my current strength. There's also a wondrous item in the sea realm called the divine water of the world. Its effects far exceeds 10,000-year heavenly resources. Once I find enough of it after I proceed to the sea realm in the future, they will be able to undergo metamorphosis, making it such that their future accomplishments will reach Saint Ruler at the very least, Jian Chen enthusiastically explained as he had planned everything out. Rui Jin fell silent. He did not say anything more, as Jian Chen obviously had his reasons for what he did. Allowing the elite squad of the flame mercenaries to settle down, Jian Chen and Rui Jin arrived in a mountain range several dozen kilometers from the city. It was the mine where they had discovered the tungsten alloy deposit. However, the mountain range was no longer as majestic as before after so many years of mining. It was now filled with holes, and several mountains had been mined away. Several huge pits had been dug where tungsten alloy ore was more concentrated. There was indeed an extremely great quantity of tungsten alloy ore in the deposit. Even after building the city walls for quite a large city, there was still a lot left. However, the ore was extremely pure, so the mining process was extremely difficult. Even Heaven Saint Masters would probably struggle to leave a mark if they struck with all they had, so the flame mercenaries stopped the mining process. They just did not possess the power to continue. Jian Chen arrived in the center of the mine with Rui Jin, staring down like a lord looking over his citizens. Below him was a large mass of jet-black tungsten alloy ore, littered with the marks from mining and gathering. Chapter 1062, The Growing Metallic Origin Energy. Jian Chen levitated above the mountain range as he looked down in interest. He was expanding his presence fully. It quickly passed through various obstructions and entered the ground. When he had first discovered the deposit, the Grand Elder of Mercenary City, Tian Jian, had found a ball of origin essence hidden deep within the deposit. It possessed extremely great power and could assist people in breaking through to Saint King from the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler. It was a rare treasure in the world. Jian Chen had also learned from the sword spirits that the origin energy hidden within the deposit was the origin energy of a metallic spirit from the 5 elements. Jian Chen's presence could pass through the obstructions of the tough tungsten alloy ore to reach several hundred meters into the ground. He could clearly feel an extremely great power pulsing slowly. It was pure with no impurities whatsoever. Senior Rui Jin, you must have also discovered that something is hidden in the mountain range of the tungsten alloy deposit, Jian Chen said as he stared down unblinkingly. A gleam of light flashed through Rui Jin's eyes, and he nonchalantly replied, I indeed have. It's an extremely pure and great power. Though it's surrounded by a thick layer of tungsten alloy. There aren't many people who can break through this layer, so it's very hard to remove. Do you have the power to remove it with your current strength then? Jian Chen said. Although the origin energy of the metallic spirit was of no use to himself, he wanted to use it on other people. If you need it, I'll make an attempt at it with my sacred dragon sword, Rui Jin slowly answered. Afterward, a vast pressure began to radiate from him and the sacred dragon sword was slowly covered by a thick layer of white light. The terrifying energy ripples caused the surrounding space to distort, showing signs of shattering apart. The origin energy of the metallic spirit is much greater than before. It's actually growing. Master, get Rui Jin to stop immediately. What he's doing will destroy it. Ziying's voice suddenly rang through Jian Chen's head. The sacred dragon sword was already lifted high up, Rui Jin was just about to cleave down. Senior Rui Jin, let's wait actually. Jian Chen also reacted quickly. He immediately stopped Rui Jin, before concentrating on his sea of consciousness to converse with the sword spirits. Master, this ball of metallic origin energy is rapidly growing. If it has enough time, it will become even stronger and even gain self-awareness. It will grow into a spirit and become something like the barrier spirit of Mercenary City. Taking it out now would be destroying it no doubt, Ziying explained. Surprise flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. Pausing for a while in thought, he then said, how long would it roughly need to mature completely? We are unable to estimate that. It'll all depend on its rate of growth. However, the origin energy will become more powerful with time. Once it gains self-awareness, it will morph into a spirit. It will be richly endowed with talent and can cultivate at a heaven-defying rate. It will have great accomplishments in the future, said Ziying. The barrier spirit of Mercenary City is also a spirit born from energy. However, it came from the essence of the earth, so it's just slightly below the metallic origin energy of the 5 elements. It's a pity that the barrier spirit's innately incomplete, or her accomplishments would be far greater than right now, sighed Ziying. It's just that the chances for it to morph into a spirit are just too low. I cannot guarantee whether the origin energy will gain self-awareness or not. It'll all depend on its fortune, said Ziying. Jian Chen hesitated slightly with what the sword spirits had said, but he ended up giving up on the idea of taking the origin energy of the metallic spirit. Since it had a lot of room for growth, why not just give it some time? It would obviously be best if it could morph into a spirit, but even if it could not become self-aware, it would become even more powerful after a period of time. At that time, the benefits would be even greater if it was used to increase strength. Senior Rui Jin, let's leave the origin energy a little longer. It won't be too late to remove it when we need it, Jian Chen said to Rui Jin. You make the decision. When you want to remove it, I can assist you in breaking through the tungsten alloy shell, said Rui Jin. Right now, his opinion of Jian Chen was rapidly rising. They had become people at similar levels of strength long ago. Even if he had no need to keep Jian Chen alive, just his talent and cultivation speed was enough to hold him in high esteem. Jian Chen and Rui Jin's eyes froze suddenly, and they turned to look in the same direction simultaneously. On the horizon, a faint gleam of 5-colored light appeared, causing the sky to become all colorful. It was pretty. Another person's reached Saint Ruler. By the direction, it should be quite close to Jessen Kingdom, Jian Chen mumbled. He was extremely indifferent to the matter. Rui Jin casually glanced at the direction before losing interest as well. Reaching Saint Ruler was a big deal to normal people, but it was nothing to his eyes. Jian Chen did not pay too much attention to the rainbow clouds in the distance either. If it was several years ago, he would treat Saint Rulers as extremely strong experts, but they had all become extremely weak now, like ants. He really could not find any interest in people at those levels anymore. Jian Chen and Rui Jin left the mountain range together, returning to the city. He handed a flaming jadeite had been filled with Rui Jin's power to Bai Lian as a treasure to guard the city. Afterward, Jian Chen summoned the 5 saint rulers that had joined the mercenaries and spoke with them. He made them swear some oaths, told them about the consequences of betrayal and so on. He then went to see Dugu Feng. He originally wanted Dugu Feng to put down what he was doing for the time being, so that he could devote all his energy into cultivation. However, Jian Chen could not do anything since Dugu Feng liked his current job very much. Jian Chen had basically subdued Dugu Feng like a servant back then, but he always treated Dugu Feng as a good friend in the past years. He never forced Dugu Feng to do anything, which was why Jian Chen did not meddle with Dugu Feng's choice. Jian Chen, the disparity between our strengths is now like the distance from the ground to the sky. I can't catch up to you no matter how hard I cultivate, so there's no longer a point for me to follow you. All I can do is stay in Flame City and help you manage some affairs. Flame City is very big, but it has developed way too fast, so there's many problems with the management since it has failed to develop at the same rate. The two worst areas are the rules and the discipline. If those aren't managed well, problems will happen to the mercenaries sooner or later. This was Dugu Feng's explanation to Jian Chen as well as his reason for taking up the position of a disciplinary elder. Jian Chen stayed for another 2 days in the city before leaving with Bai Hai after handing over some matters. He returned to the Changyang clan in Lore City through a space gate from Ruijin. As soon as he returned, Changyang Zhu Yunxiao came looking for him. He called Jian Chen into a conference hall while Ruijin and Bai Hai both left to rest. They did not follow him to the hall. Jian Chen discovered a few unfamiliar people as soon as he entered the grand hall. They were an old man and 3 women. However, the thing that surprised Jian Chen was that Yu Yu was actually present as well and not cultivating in outer space. Her complexion was not very great. Jian Chen's face sank slightly when he noticed Yu Yu's expression. He seemed to realize something before observing the 4 outsiders. The old man possessed a ruddy and sagely aura, like some old immortal. He sat there leisurely and did not speak. Jian Chen had seen the old man before. He was one of the great elders of the Changyang Protector clan, a saint king at the 6th heavenly layer. One of the 3 women was a middle-aged beauty. She was a saint ruler while the other 2 ladies seemed to be in their 20s. They stood out quite a lot with their appearances as well. Though they were heaven saint masters. Jian Chen, this is one of the 7 great elders of the Changyang clan, Changyang Qing Juri. He would be a great-grandfather of yours in terms of seniority, Changyang Zhu Yunxiao introduced for Jian Chen. Changyang Qing Juri stared at Jian Chen ever since he had come in. With Changyang Zhu Yunxiao's introduction, he immediately stood up and smiled amicably. He said, "You must be Xiangtian. You really are a genius. The Protector clans gained quite the glory from you. Come sit, come sit." Changyang Qing Juri treated Jian Chen extremely politely. Although Jian Chen was a junior by age, he did not act snobbishly. Jian Chen bowed politely before taking the empty seat next to Yu Yu. He asked politely as he looked at Yu Yu's troubled expression, "Yue, what's happening here?" Yu Yu was clearly relieved now that Jian Chen had made it in time. She seemed to have found the person she would rely on, and much of her worries vanished. She said to Jian Chen, "They want my Bright Moon Divine Hall." What? Jian Chen's expression abruptly changed with that, taking a bad turn in complexion. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.